Chapter 166. Nangong's lips curled into a smile. In the end, his main body was still too simple and pure. Just by using words to provoke him, he had already become so angry. It was clearly just a pile of tears from the shadows of the people close to him. He had actually started to lose control of his emotions bit by bit. He hadn't even started the main act yet. Nangongja looked at his younger sister, who had been with him for almost all of his life. Who knew how many ups and downs, big and small, Nangong Ro. Nangong Ro. Nangong. Looking at Nangong Ro, Nangongja called out their names. This so-called Nangong, is it really my surname? Or is this a surname that I don't know who forced it on me? Looking at her brother, Nangong Ro's eyes were wide open. It was obvious that she had been exposed to some facts that she didn't want to face. From the moment I had my memories, I already didn't have you. My dear younger sister calls me Nangongja. I also have the rich inner strength that you call our grandfather and passed on to me in order to protect our lives, as well as this heavenly tribulation sort of extraordinary origin. Do you know that when I was still unable to control the inner strength in my body? Every day at midnight, the inner strength in my body would go berserk. It would wander around my meridians without restraint. How much do you know about the pain of my meridians being torn apart? Our lives were very difficult. Every day, we ate the cheapest ingredients. Many times, we even had to rely on the help of our neighbors and Uncle Chimu from the blacksmith shop to survive. In order to let you, my younger sister, have a better life. I could only go to the small forest behind the house every day and rely on the true intent of the sword Tao that I felt from the tribulation sword to practice sword techniques. Practicing swordsmanship will stimulate the internal energy in my body. After midnight, it will make me suffer even more. Finally, I joined the wood leaf ninja village that I had always dreamed of. But what are ninjas? To put it nicely, they are a group of people who have great strength and stand at the top of the world. But to put it bluntly, aren't ninjas just killing machines controlled by money? For our life, so that you, my sister, can live a more stable life. I could only hold the heavenly calamity sword and walk on the edge of death time and time again. In order to keep you away from death, I had to think of a way to send you to the Kiba hospital with the lowest risk factor. Injured again and again, staining my hands with blood again and again. I'll tell myself that I'm fighting so hard for my sister. But you know what? As my strength increased, more and more scenes of our childhood appeared in my mind, which were different from what you said about us. In these images, I have my father, my mother, and my grandfather, but I don't see you. Presumably, the grandfather you speak of didn't think that one day, I would be able to cultivate to the point where my spiritual power could break through the seal he set, right? I saw it. My father, my mother, everything I knew, the place I grew up in, disappeared without a trace in the fire and massacre. I was tearfully stuffed into the cellar of my own home by my mother. What echoed in my ears were the last cries of the passing of life. The surrounding air was so hot, I knew that there was a raging fire around me. But I could only cover my mouth like this, not even daring to cry out. Finally, when all the sounds outside returned to silence, with my own hands, I dug away the dirt and ashes that covered the cellar door. I told myself again and again, I want to live. I want to live and find those who made me lose everything. I want to take revenge on them. Then I lost consciousness. But I faintly saw two people, an old man and a little girl. Tell me, who are the two of them? Who was the one who covered up my memories? Who was the one who brought the baptism of war to my remote village that stood aloof from worldly affairs? Who was it? Who was it? I don't know how many times I thought about it, but in the end, I realized that it was the two of them. My closest sister, the girl called Nangong Ro, and the grandfather she spoke of. Nangongja looked at Nangong Ro, but his tone didn't fluctuate at all. Even though he was talking about his childhood memories that were covered up, his tone was still as cold as ever. It was as if he was talking about a story that had nothing to do with him, but the black light in his eyes was shining brighter. Actually, Nangongja had always known this. Since his strength increased day by day, more and more memory fragments would appear in Nangong's mind through the seal. However, Nangongja had never mentioned it. In fact, Nangongja was very afraid. He was very afraid that his current life would no longer exist. Therefore, Nangongja chose to escape and chose to ignore all possible guesses. He only wanted to use the name Nangongja and continue living with his sister, Mishiro, and little Linger. These were the things that Nangongja was most unwilling to touch. Nangongja was very clear that the Nangong-ro, Mishiro, and little Linger in front of him were all illusions created by the trial. However, his inner demon's questions were also questions to Nangongja. These sharp questions were like sharp blades that were gouging Nangongja's heart. Nangongja had already lost control of his body. He could only watch as his sister, Mishiro, and little Linger sat in front of him. They were either crying, blaming themselves, or not saying a word. Inner demon! Inner demon! Inner demon! Get over here, get over here! Nangongja roared. Nangongja roared. However, the inner demon seemed to be unaware and had already slowly pulled out the Heaven's Calamity Sword. What did the inner demon want to do? The Heaven's Calamity Sword's edge was already on Nangong-ro's white neck. The slight friction caused the Heaven's Calamity Sword to leave a bloody mark on Nangong-ro's neck. Was this inner demon trying to kill his sister? No, it wasn't just his sister. There was also Mishiro and little Linger. The inner demon wouldn't let any of them go. Even if the Nangong-ro, Mishiro, and little Linger here were all illusions, Nangongja was still unwilling to watch them die. He had to do something. Chapter 167. Feeling his growing power, Nangongja knew that his original body was on the verge of collapse. And the method to completely destroy his original body was so simple. He only needed to gently swing his sword 3 times to end the 3 phantoms in front of him that couldn't even be considered as living beings. It was really too simple, wasn't it? To be tied down by these meaningless emotions, to let your sword be covered with rust by these useless people. Such a body is so useless that I can't stand it anymore. Since you're so useless, why don't you let me replace you? Whether it's the name of Yama or the sharpness of the Heaven's Calamity Sword, let me properly display their power. Nangongja raised the Heaven's Calamity Sword in his hand that had already been unsheathed. The blade's sharpness was getting closer and closer to Nangong-ro's neck. 3 inches, 2 inches, 1 inch, 1 inch. When the blade was about to touch Nangong-ro's neck, it stopped. Just a little bit more, just a little bit more, and Nangong-ro's life would be gone. But at this moment, Nangongja's eyes no longer had the black light that was controlled by the inner demon, nor did they have the usual brilliance. Instead, they became very lifeless, as if his body no longer belonged to anyone. What are you doing? Just a little bit more, just a little bit more. The inner demon looked at Nangongja, who was tightly bound by the black chains in front of him, and his face became very ferocious. Clearly, as long as he waved his sword, he could take away Nangong-ro's life. Let his original body completely collapse. Let him completely control Nangongja's body. But the inner demon was once again pulled back into the spiritual space by an incomprehensible force. Clearly, I've already completely controlled the body, and you've been suppressed by me to such a state. How did you pull me into this space? Nangongja should be at a disadvantage right now. Whether it was the black chains on his body or the completely changed color of his spiritual space, they all proved that Nangongja was at a disadvantage. However, Nangongja had a gentle smile on his face, as if everything was not that bad. Indeed, you are very powerful. You've used your power to completely control my physical body and spiritual space. Nangongja raised his head and looked at the ferocious face of his inner demon. Everything you've said, everything you've done, is known to me. These were all things I didn't want to talk about, because once the truth was revealed, I wouldn't say it out loud. Then everything I love and cherish will cease to exist. Even though the one outside is an illusion of my sister, Mishiro, and little Linger, I'm not sure if it's real or not. But their emotions, their memories, and their thoughts are all girls that I love and cherish. It's you who made me see the price I have to pay after revealing the truth. You must have felt my mixed feelings of anger, sadness, and powerlessness at that time, right? But these feelings are not because of those 3 girls, but because of my anger, sadness, and powerlessness. It's because I'm not strong enough. It's because I let you take control of my body. It's all because I'm too weak. When the inner demon heard Nangong's words and realized that his original body was blaming himself, the expression on his face was extremely rich. He was the one who did all these things. His original body's sadness, anger, and powerlessness were the most exquisite metals that should belong to him. But now, his original body was telling him that these did not belong to him? What a joke! It's indeed your fault. You cared about these meaningless things. You gave little Linger tolerance, gave Mishiro forgiveness, and gave Nangong-ro love. These things have made you so weak. These things made you fall into your current situation. Where's the viciousness you had when you killed people? Where's the wit you had when you and those ninjas schemed against each other? Where's the aura you had when you were called Yama? Just because of these 3 women, you've become so weak. You became a weak existence that only knows how to blame yourself and feel sorry for yourself. Since you can't be Yama, you're not worthy of this Heaven's Calamity Sword. Why don't you let me replace you and become the Yama that should have made everyone tremble? Nangongja had not yet become agitated, but the inner demon was already speaking more and more passionately. You're right. I don't have the viciousness I had in the past. I don't have the mood to scheme against each other, and I don't have the aura to directly take the lives of those who stand in my way. But, did this really make me weaker? No, it's the opposite. I feel that after I threw away these things, I've truly become who I should be. After I took in little Linger, I gained innocence. After I forgave Mishiro, I gained freedom. When I saw Ruru as my family, I gained the meaning of life. These things were never meaningless trash. To me, these are the meaning of my battle. The more Nangongja spoke, the more resolute his heart became. What was an inner demon? It was a hole in one's heart. Everyone would more or less have an inner demon. It was just that Nangongja's inner demon, for unknown reasons, suddenly escaped from Nangongja's control. The inner demon also knew that it had to directly cause its original body to collapse in order to truly become an independent entity. This was why it repeatedly challenged Nangongja's bottom line in these 2 trials. But now, Nangongja seemed to have seen through its confusion and actually began to slowly gain control of the spiritual space. You're just one of my prisoners now. What's the point of saying so many righteous words? I'll let you have a good look at my power. The inner demon's agitation also caused a change in the spiritual space. The sky and the surrounding areas covered in blood and black began to emit a black and red light. The magma pools on the ground also began to boil. It pulled out the calamity sword in its hand, as if it wanted to slash at Nangongja. Nangongja raised his head and looked at the inner demon in front of him, who had already gone mad and turned into a demon. Its eyes were filled with disdain and ridicule, as if it was looking at its disobedient poodle. Whose sword do you think you're holding in your hand? Chapter 168. When the inner demon heard Nangongja's words, he didn't say anything. Instead, he looked at the Heaven's Calamity Sword in his hand. Doesn't it belong to whoever has the sword? The Heaven's Calamity Sword is indeed very intelligent, but in the end, it's still a sword. Do you think it can run to the hands of the owner who let it collect dust? If the Heaven's Calamity Sword really does have a consciousness, it will definitely choose me to be its owner. When he heard the inner demon's confident words, Nangongja's smile became even wider. You shouldn't be making your own assumptions about who it will choose. Isn't it better to let the Heaven's Calamity Sword choose? Let the Heaven's Calamity Sword choose? Just based on... The inner demon was just about to mock his main body for looking at a sword as if it was a person. But at this moment, the Heaven's Calamity Sword in the inner demon's hand began to tremble slightly. The sword's cries echoed in the surroundings, as if it had really come to life. Look, the Heaven's Calamity Sword can still make its own choice, right? Nangongja looked at the inner demon, as if he was sure he would win. However, the inner demon wasn't someone who could be easily fooled. Whether it was in terms of IQ or EQ, The inner demon and Nangongzhi were almost the same. The Heaven's Calamity Sword definitely wouldn't have its own consciousness. In this world, there had never been any item that had the ability to think for itself. Then, what caused the Heaven's Calamity Sword to act so strangely? One had to know that he was in a spiritual space that was already under his control. All illusion tricks had nowhere to hide in front of him. Wait, spiritual space? Could it be that you... Impossible, impossible. This spiritual space is completely under my control. With your current state, how can you break free from my restraints and regain control of this spiritual space? The inner demon still spoke his conjecture. Although the inner demon didn't want to believe it, this was already the most likely answer he knew. Looking at the black chains wrapped around Nangongzhi's body, these chains evolved from a part of the inner demon's power. All of Nangongzhi's movements would be transmitted to his consciousness through the chains. He clearly didn't feel anything, so Nangongzhi couldn't break free from the chain's restraints. You and I are of the same origin. Although you've inexplicably received an unknown power, you're still a part of me. The chains. Nangongzhi looked at the chains wrapped around his body and began to slowly stand up from his originally paralyzed state. An icy blue light suddenly burst out from Nangongzhi's body and began to attack the chain's restraints. The inner demon trusted the black chains very much, but in an instant, the light from Nangongzhi's body pierced through them. The chains were clearly very sturdy, but they were like paper. As soon as Nangongzhi raised his arm, they were broken. At the same time, the entire spiritual space began to drizzle. The drizzle was very small, but very dense. It even had a similar color to the light from Nangongzhi's body. When the drizzle touched the black and red that covered the entire spiritual space, the black and red were instantly washed away. The lava pools on the ground were also extinguished by the drizzle. I don't accept this. I don't accept this. I don't accept this. What I did was what you thought deep in your heart. I only did what you didn't dare to do normally according to your wishes. Why should I lose to a hypocrite like you? If you didn't have any dark thoughts, if you didn't have a trace of evil, if you didn't have any evil intentions, I wouldn't exist. You would never be able to destroy me. Because I am you. Unless you die, I will never be banished. The inner demon was also in the drizzle. Every drizzle that touched the inner demon's body caused wisps of smoke to rise from his body. It was like the smoke from a fire that was poured with water. The inner demon couldn't withstand such power. He wailed, he roared, he scolded his original body for being hypocritical and his own greatness. Dark thoughts? Evil thoughts? I've never denied these things. Just like what you said, these things are a part of me since I was born. As long as I'm alive, these thoughts will continue to appear. They can't be killed and they can't be destroyed. So, I choose to accept them. I don't think I'm a person filled with kindness. I only forgive people that I'm willing to forgive. Kill people? Torture people? It's not like I haven't done it before. The inner demon looked at the original body standing in front of him, who looked exactly like him, and said these words softly. You want to assimilate me? Yes, the inner demon knew that this was the purpose of his original body. He wanted to merge his kindness and evil thoughts again, instead of suppressing his evil thoughts like in the past. I don't want to. It wasn't easy for me to escape from your control and have my own independent thoughts and consciousness. Now, you want me to merge with you again by saying that you're willing to tolerate me? I refuse. I refuse. Nangongzhi looked at the incarnation of his evil thoughts, the inner demon. For a moment he didn't know what to say. After all, the inner demon was created by himself. The so-called mysterious external force was actually just to advance the growth of the inner demon. He had to face this problem in the end. Nangongzhi waved his hand, and the catastrophe sword in the inner demon's hand was already in Nangongzhi's hand. He waved the long sword in his hand, and his mental strength was also mobilized along with the long sword. Shwa, 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 shwa. There were 4 consecutive sounds of the air being cut through, and 4 invisible barriers rose in the spiritual space that had returned to its original white and flawless appearance, imprisoning the inner demon. Nangongzhi took a deep look at his inner demon. He opened his mouth several times but didn't know what to say. He could only silently shake his head, turn around, and leave the spiritual space. He regained control of his body. Looking at Mashiro, Nangong Ro, and Little Linger, who were in a daze in front of him. Even Nangongja didn't know what to say, although they were all illusions formed by this trial space. However, everything seemed so real. Ru, Mashiro, Little Linger. Nangongja gently called the names of the three girls, but the three girls were in a daze and didn't respond at all. He could only gently wave his sleeves, and a burst of mental strength instantly gushed out, directly bursting the illusion formed by the trial space. This was the improvement Nangongja had obtained after the crisis of the heart demon. Everything around him returned to its original state. It was a deep and empty space. Only a token carved with exquisite dragon patterns and surrounded by water aura was floating in front of Nangongja. Chapter 169. Nangongja once again stood on the back of the golden dragon. Unlike before, when his inner demons seized control of his body, Nangongja had completely returned to his original appearance. This time, what appeared in front of Nangongja was a door arch formed by two crimson dragons. Without hesitation, Nangongja took a step into the cave. Perhaps it was because of his previous experience? Nangongja only wanted to pass through these levels as soon as possible. Then, he would return to the Lion Clan's alternate space and take a good look at Nangong Ro, Mashiro, and Little Linger. After this thought appeared in Nangongja's mind, it could not be dispersed. Congratulations, you have reached the third level. You have seen through the things you are obsessed with. No matter if it's your soul or your body, both have reached an indescribable level of improvement. We live in this world, we will experience all kinds of things and meet all kinds of people. We will be happy, but we will also be hurt. You have the skills and temperament. Can you bear the pain? I am very curious. This Crimson Dragon door is to test how much pain you can endure. In front of you, there is a path. It is filled with flames that can burn both the body and the soul. No matter how far you can go, you will obtain the Crimson Dragon token. All of this is related to your choice. Senior Liege's voice rang out as usual, explaining the stages to everyone who challenged him. No matter how far I can go, I will obtain the token for this level? Nangongja did not think too much and directly stepped on the path in front of him, which was burning with golden flames for some reason. When his first step landed, he felt a burning sensation on the bottom of his feet. But that was it. With Nangongja's willpower, he was able to endure the pain. Second step, third step. With every step, the burning sensation Nangongja endured became more and more intense. The air around him became hotter and hotter, and waves of pain came from his head. Was this the soul-burning flame that Banishment Senior mentioned? Countless flames rose up, like a dancer who had not danced for a long time and heard his favorite music. It constantly jumped and swayed. Nangongja did not have too many distracting thoughts. He just walked forward step by step. A flame suddenly rose up and touched Nangongja's robe. Nangongja's consciousness was a little blurred at this moment. He did not notice that his robe was on fire. Robe was made of ordinary materials. It was unavoidable that it started to burn. After a while, his robe was burned. It was a beggar's robe. Nangongja's skin began to be exposed under the threat of the flames. His skin began to turn black. If he sniffed carefully, he might even be able to smell the pungent smell of burnt flesh. Time gradually passed, and the flames around Nangongja began to burn higher and higher. Nangongja was now almost drowned in the flames. Besides the pain, Nangongja could not feel anything. He just walked forward like a machine. Suddenly, a sentence appeared in Nangongja's mind. No matter how far you can go, you will receive the Scarlet Dragon token. No matter how far I can go, I will receive the token? That's right. Banishment's words appeared in Nangongja's mind again. Was it enough? Was it enough for him to reach this point? He was really in pain. His mental power and physical strength were at their weakest. There were 5 levels here, and he had only passed the 3rd one. There were 2 more levels that were more difficult than this one waiting for him. Should he give up? Should he give up so that he could have a higher chance of passing the remaining levels? Anyway, He had already come so far. He could definitely get the token for this level. Why should he not give up? His goal was to pass the levels and become the head of the Blood Garment Pavilion. He did not have to pass these levels perfectly. Why should he not give up? Give up. It was enough for now. He could definitely get the token. Why should he suffer like this? However, even if Nangongzhi was hesitating, his footsteps never stopped. It was as if there was a voice in his heart telling him that he should never give up. The original scarlet flames with a little bit of gold had turned into a completely golden flame. The heavenly calamity sword in his hand had also lost its usual coolness. It was now burning hot from the flames. Sword? A swordsman would rather break than bend. The sword is the courage of the person who wields it. As long as you still hold the sword in your hand, as long as you still have your sword in your heart, you should face all dangers. Then, you should be brave enough to face all dangers. Our lives are destined to be filled with thorns. Some people rely on their wisdom, and some rely on tricks to get through the dangers. However, your sword will tell you that you don't need to use such methods. The sword in your hand is the best way to face everything. Hee. These words were so righteous that it was impossible to refute. It sounded so good, but did it really have any practical meaning? However, who was the one who said these words? It seemed to be the senior from the banishment who had already started persuading people to give up at the beginning of the level. Misdirection? Nangongzhi vaguely guessed the meaning of the banishment's words at the beginning of the level. What test the pain, what could be given up? It was all nonsense. If he really gave up, it would be impossible to pass this level. This level was supposed to test whether a person's heart was firm or not. Go. I must walk to the end. Even if I can't pass the remaining 2 levels, even if I may not be able to become the head of the Blood Garment Pavilion, Nangongzhi still wanted to pass the level. These flames were, in fact, the best companion for tempering one's temperament. If he could really persevere to the end, then the problem of the heart demon would be much easier to solve. Whether it was the Blood Garment Pavilion or the head of the Blood Garment Pavilion, the most important thing was to improve his own strength. Raging fire to forge true gold. This was the key to the Scarlet Dragon Door. Nangongzhi continued to move forward, even if his feet no longer listened to him. He would use his own hands to crawl forward bit by bit. Even if his hands could no longer exert any strength, he would use his own body to move forward bit by bit. Chapter 170. At this moment, Nangongzhi had already lost consciousness. Just how far had he walked on this burning path? Nangongzhi didn't know at all. In fact, if there was another bystander, it wouldn't be difficult to see that this so-called straight path of flames was actually in the shape of a circle. It was just that because of the cover of the flames and the misdirection of the trial, it made people think that it was actually a straight path. It was a path with no end, and it could only keep going in circles. A token with a fiery red halo floated in front of Nangongzhi's forehead. Although the light was very weak, it covered the surrounding golden flames. A brilliance surged from the token and instantly spread to Nangongzhi's entire body. Nangongzhi's body, along with the brilliance, turned into a stream of light and was teleported out of the trial space. Nangongzhi was lying on the back of the golden dragon. A gust of wind that came out of nowhere brushed past Nangongzhi's ear. It woke Nangongzhi up. Ever since I entered this trial, I've been in a coma. If I didn't know that I was the only one in this trial space, I would really be worried about my own safety. With a bitter smile on his face, Nangongzhi made fun of himself. After checking his body, Nangongzhi found that no matter if it was his robe or his skin, there were no traces of being burned by the flames on the path of the Scarlet Dragon Gate. Although he couldn't figure out what was going on, Nangongzhi was no longer in the mood to think about his clothes. This was because Nangongzhi was holding the Crimson Dragon token that was burning in his hand at the moment. Azure Dragon? Water Dragon? Scarlet Dragon? These things belong to wood, water, and fire of the 5 elements. If I'm not mistaken, this earthen yellow dragon in front of me represents the power of earth, one of the 5 elements, right? But there are only 4 arches here. Where did the remaining metal element trial come from? Nangongzhi took out the 3 tokens that he had already obtained and began to slowly think about the problem of this trial space. After all, there was a checkpoint in front of him that he needed to break through. It wouldn't be too late to say these words after he had passed through the Earth Dragon Gate Arch, right? The 2 earth-colored dragons faced each other and looked down with their big eyes. Nangongzhi stepped into the archway. Unlike before, when Nangongzhi arrived at a place similar to a spatial crevice, when he stepped into the arch of the Earth Dragon Gate, he had already arrived at the real trial space. This should be a cave. The air was slightly damp and musty. It seemed that the ventilation wasn't that good. Inside the walls of the cave, there were oil lamps that were ignited by an unknown source. Although the light wasn't that bright, it was still enough to illuminate the dark cave. This is... Nangongzhi stretched out his hand to touch the wall that was relatively close to him. A trace of moist and cool feeling came from his fingers. The first trial started with battle. The second trial was to break through obsession. The third trial was to walk through fire. It's really tough. The voice of the senior banishment came again. However, Nangongzhi felt that the senior's voice was starting to become weaker with every banishment. In the first trial, the senior spoke like an observer and judge. But now, the tone of his voice had a bit of annoyance. It was like a person reading a script. At the beginning, he felt that he was very good at what he said, so he read it very seriously. But the more he read, the more he found that the words he said were the same, so he didn't want to read anymore. I say, senior banishment, you really didn't come up with these words, right? If it was the senior banishment that he was familiar with, if he were to say these words, the senior banishment would have torn the script to pieces the moment it reached his hands. Then he would say, reading this kind of thing, I might as well go drink to my heart's content, and disappear. Sure enough, when the senior banishment helped the Blood Clothing Pavilion build this trial space, he was still young. He hadn't had time to awaken his strange attribute yet. These words are really boring. Trial taker, follow the passage and you will find a picture. I drew it myself. As long as you can understand the things within the stipulated time, you will be able to pass this earthen dragon trial. As expected, his nature was exposed, right? Exposed, right? When Nangongzhi heard the senior banishment's lazy voice, for the first time, he felt that the senior banishment he knew was really the person he knew. Picture? I wonder what kind of painting Senior Xianxia will be able to draw with his own hands. Thinking about it, he was even a little bit interested. Nangongzhi walked all the way into the cave. At first, Nangongzhi was still on guard against any traps or beasts that would suddenly appear along the way to prevent him from reaching the depths of the cave. But after walking for a long time, he found that there were no abnormalities. Nangongzhi put the Heaven's Calamity sword back into his scabbard. The first few checkpoints were indeed not easy to pass. With Nangongzhi's temperament and strength, it was very difficult for him to pass. This also proved that Senior Xianxia had put in a lot of effort in designing these trials. But now, there were no obstacles at all in this stage. This was not a good thing. This proved that the senior banishment had great confidence in the picture he left behind. He was confident that it was enough to surpass the difficulty of the first 3 stages. Losing inner strength, being trapped, and burning the soul and body were all not as difficult as this picture? What's inside? Nangongzhi fiddled with his mouth. He was also thinking about what kind of picture the senior banishment had left behind. With the senior banishment's temperament, he probably would not seriously learn how to draw. Naturally, he did not want people to understand the creative ideas behind the picture scroll. What was the senior banishment's best at? Alcohol tolerance? Or the way of the sword? If he was not wrong, it should be something related to the sword. Then what was inside the picture? Sword moves? Sword intent? No matter what it was, since the senior banishment was confident that it could stump the participants who had reached this stage, it must be very difficult. Whether it's sword moves or sword intent, let me take a good look. The senior banishment's gift to the Blood Robe Pavilion. Chapter 171. Speaking of which, the crypt wasn't very long. After a while, Nangongzhi had reached the deepest part of the crypt. There was a small space in the depths of the crypt. There was only a stone table and a stone stool. A scroll painting was placed on the stone table. Compared to the previous 3 levels, this is a little shabby. Compared to the previous 3 levels, which had huge forests, realistic illusions, and endless paths covered in flames, the simple crypt space here was very shabby and rustic. Nangong's gaze drifted to the scroll painting on the stone table. This must be the painting that Senior Banishment mentioned, right? He walked step by step to the side of the stone table and sat down on the stone stool. Nangongja reached out and held the scroll painting in his hand. A different aura escaped from the scroll painting, bringing with it an iron-blooded and murderous aura as it charged towards Nangongja. Sure enough, the scroll painting left behind by Senior Banishment wasn't something ordinary. Nangongja unfolded the scroll painting in his hand. The aura of iron and blood and murderous aura was finally released and rushed towards him. This so-called painting wasn't really a painting. It was just a simple ink mark, as if it was casually waved by a person. Is this the painting that Senior Banishment mentioned? It's really simple. Nangongja slightly ridiculed the banishment painting and looked at the ink mark. However, he didn't feel anything at all. It was just like a simple painting. Just as Nangongja looked at the ink mark, a decaying aura was constantly emitted from the bottom of the scroll painting. The pure white paper quickly turned yellow under the influence of the decaying aura, then slowly turned dark brown. It was as if it had been weathered for a long time and was even slowly decomposing. Is this the so-called time limit? Either I can comprehend the true meaning of this ink mark in time, or the scroll painting will directly decay and disappear, and then fail the challenge? Nangongja finally understood how the time limit mentioned by the Senior Banishment was achieved. He tried to inject his internal energy into the scroll, but the scroll didn't react at all. It was just like an ordinary scroll. Not inner force? Nangongja murmured to himself. Since it was impossible to discover the secrets within the scroll with the naked eye, there must be some sort of key that would allow people to discover the secrets within the scroll. Inner force or spiritual force. He then tried to attach his mental power to the scroll. The gentle mental power quickly permeated into every tiny structure of the scroll. There was still no reaction. By the time Nangongja tested the 2 powers, a third of the scroll had already been corroded by the decaying aura. There were also many places that had already dissipated. Banishment. Tribulation sword. Sword chi. Nangongja thought hard for a long time, but he seemed to have forgotten the most important thing. That was the sword that the Senior Banishment was most fond of. Wasn't sword chi the most closely related to swords? But could such a fragile piece of paper really withstand the tyrannical sword chi? Nangongja didn't know, but Nangongja could only think of such a choice. He had no choice but to inject a very small amount of sword chi into the scroll painting. What was sword chi? It was a type of energy that mainly attacked and killed. Although Nangongja only used a very small amount of sword chi, the effect was very significant. The sword chi and the decaying aura that was originally corroding the scroll suddenly formed a different kind of connection. The decaying aura became denser under the stimulation of the sword chi, and the sword chi seemed to feel that it had to fight against the decaying aura. It constantly devoured the decaying aura to nourish itself, becoming stronger and stronger. This is really, looking at the scroll painting that was corroding faster, Nangongja only wanted to knock his head hard. Why did he suddenly think of injecting sword chi into it? What else was the most closely related to the Banishment Senior? If it wasn't a sword, then what was the favorite thing of the Banishment Senior? The thing that the Senior Banishment Senior liked? Wine? Good what? The drunken immortal wine in the green jade gourd that the Senior Banishment Senior gave him? Although the choice of wine was a bit of a joke, at this moment, the scroll painting was corroding faster and faster, and Nangongja didn't have time to think about the mystery calmly. Nangongja took off the green jade gourd on his back and used his mouth to bite open the cork that sealed the gourd. He directly sprinkled the wine on the scroll painting. This was Nangongja's last attempt. It was also the last possible attempt that Nangongja could make to pass this level. The wine slowly soaked the ink. In just a moment, the ink had turned from black to a blood-red color. Even this works? Nangongja was just trying to make a last resort by sprinkling the drunken immortal wine on the scroll painting. He didn't expect it to actually work. As expected, this level is really more difficult than the previous ones. Which disciple of the Blood Cloak Pavilion who came here for such a serious trial would bring wine, especially drunken immortal wine that no one knows how to brew? Without drunken immortal wine, there is no way to remove the ink on the scroll painting. Without removing the ink, how can I pass this level? At this moment, Nangongja only felt that the banishment senior was indeed evil. Wasn't he deliberately making things difficult for others? Life's two pleasures are sword and wine. Suddenly, Nangongja heard a faint sound. It was like a person singing with a sword while drinking to his heart's content. Not only did it sound in his ears, but it also seemed to appear in front of Nangongja's eyes. Although he couldn't see the person's figure clearly, he was holding a sword in his hand. The Heavenly Calamity Sword. This must be the Banishment Senior. In the image, the Banishment Senior was holding a brush. However, it wasn't the posture of an ordinary person writing. Instead, it was as if he was holding a sword. Drops of ink dripped from the brush. However, in midair, there was an invisible force that dragged the ink back to the tip of the brush. Painting? Writing? I'm not good at any of those. I only know how to wield a sword. Since I'm going to paint, I have to paint like a sword. After saying that, the Banishment Senior's aura, which had been slightly scattered due to drinking, was instantly restrained. His eyes, which were originally filled with a sense of sharpness, were now restrained. He looked like an ordinary person. Just like that, the Banishment Senior took the brush and drew on a piece of white paper in front of him. It was the ink painting that Nangongja was carefully looking at. Chapter 172. Puff. Like a bubble bursting, everything in front of Nangongja seemed to turn into countless bubbles in an instant, floating away without a trace. Whether it was the sound of banishment or the figure of banishment, they all disappeared with the bubbles at this moment. Only the scroll painting in Nangongja's hand was left. Whether it was the rotten aura that had been corroding the scroll painting, or the sword chi injected by Nangongja, they all disappeared in an instant, and the blood-red lines on the ink on the scroll painting also disappeared without a trace. Only the traces of Nangongja's wine were still faintly visible. Am I enlightened? Nangongja asked himself, but found that he didn't understand. He just stared blankly at the scroll painting in his hand, not knowing what to say. In front of Nangongja, a dragon pattern token surrounded by some yellow aura was still floating. Nangongja reached out and took the token in his hand. Following the brilliance of the token, he left the crypt. Perhaps only the half-corroded scroll painting placed on the stone table by Nangongja could prove that Nangongja had come here to accept this trial. He still came to the back of the golden dragon, but there was no arch in front of him. Nangongja was in a trance. His goal here was very simple. It was to pass these levels and then become the head of the Blood Cloth Pavilion, adding a few chips to his survival in the ninja world. However, after passing such a few levels, Nangongja didn't know if he could be qualified to become the head of the Blood Cloth Pavilion once he became the head of the Blood Cloth Pavilion. From the beginning, from the words of the several altar lords, Nangongja could faintly find that although the banishment elder he respected was the head of the Blood Cloth Pavilion, he had never intervened. Although this has something to do with the character of the banishment elder, that kind of personality is afraid of trouble, he would definitely not accept such a troublesome position. However, wasn't part of the reason also because it was too heavy to bear the burden of the lives of all the members of the organization on his shoulders? Nangongja thought about such a problem. His pace did not stop, and he kept walking forward along the back of the golden dragon. Not knowing how long he walked, Nangongja freed himself from his thoughts and found that he was already standing on the huge head of the golden dragon. Compared to the 8 dragons that turned into arches before, the golden dragon was extraordinarily large. Nangongja moved his body a little bit closer to the golden dragon's horn, but found that his body was not as thick as the golden dragon's horn. This golden dragon should be the last level, right? From the beginning, I have already stepped on the golden dragon level. Metal, wood, water, fire, earth, they really have a different order. But what kind of level is this? According to the previous levels, the Banishment Elder should have introduced the specific content of the level to Nangongzhi, but there was nothing this time. The surroundings were extremely quiet, and even the sound of the breeze was very clear in Nangongzhi's ears. Roar! The golden dragon under Nangongzhi's feet suddenly began to sway, and a dragon's roar was heard. The sound was very loud, and it even formed a wave of air that impacted the surrounding space. Countless clouds were scattered by the dragon's roar. After the golden dragon roared, it suddenly opened its 4 claws, and clouds of mist condensed under its claws. Not long after, the golden dragon's body was covered by the mist, and the golden dragon itself began to fly. Nangongzhi quickly grabbed the golden dragon's horn that was relatively close to him, and stabilized his body. He braved the fierce wind and flew in the sky with the golden dragon. Nangongzhi no longer had the energy to calculate the passage of time, because the strong wind made Nangongzhi have to be careful not to fall off the golden dragon's head. When Nangongzhi opened his eyes that were unable to open because of the fierce wind, Nangongzhi found himself on the shore of a lake. It was not appropriate to call it the surface of a lake, because this so-called lake did not exist on the ground. The lake was suspended in the sky as if it was being dragged by white clouds. The color of the sky was reflected on the surface of the lake, and the lakeside was dyed a dazzling blue. Traces of mist condensed on the surface of the lake, and from time to time, its body twisted and swayed, giving off an ethereal feeling. If this world really had a so-called fairyland, Nangongzhi believed that this place must be a fairyland. It really suits Senior Banishment's taste. If I can stay in a place like this for a period of time without any distractions, I believe that I will definitely make progress on the path of inner strength and swordsmanship. Because this place is really suitable for calming down and improving my own shortcomings. Nangongzhi stood on the shore and looked at his reflection on the surface of the lake, and for a moment, he was filled with emotions. Trying to put his feet on the surface of the lake, Nangongzhi found that an invisible force appeared from the lake, and it formed a balance with his own strength. Sure enough, I can step on it? For some reason, when Nangongzhi saw such a flat surface of the lake, he could not help but have the thought of stepping on it. He stretched out his feet to test it, and it was really possible to step on it. Presumably, the trial for this stage is in the distant misty clouds, right? Nangongzhi looked at the clouds in the distance and began to guess. Since there were a total of 5 trials, and he was on a lake that could allow people to step on, it was not difficult to guess that his last trial would be in the depths of the clouds. Step by step, he stepped on the surface of the lake, and the wind carried a unique fishy smell to Nangongzhi's nose. Wisps of coolness spread from Nangongzhi's feet to his entire body. Under the influence of these two, Nangongzhi felt that his mind had become exceptionally calm. Even his mental strength had become exceptionally sensitive. There's more? Looks like this trial is not that simple. Nangongzhi knew that there was no free lunch in this trial. In the arch of the Earthen Dragon Gate, there were no obstructions throughout the entire trial. Now that he thought about it, how unbearable would the final trial be? With the help of the lake's surface, his body and mental strength had been adjusted to their best condition. This proved that he would definitely have to risk his life in the final trial. The final trial would definitely be the most difficult one. Chapter 173. After clearing away the fog in front of him, Nangongzhi entered the center of the lake, which was most likely the place where the final trial would take place. A huge mysterious rune was engraved on the surface of the lake through some unknown method. Originally, the closer one was to the center of the lake, the thicker the fog was. However, the fog here seemed to have been forcibly driven away, making the surroundings exceptionally bright. Whoosh! The 4 tokens that Nangongzhi obtained from the previous trial suddenly flew out and landed on the blind spots of the formation one by one. The dragon aura token that was originally entwined with the light representing each of the 5 elements suddenly became particularly dazzling. These lights instantly turned into a green dragon that represented the wood element, a blue dragon that represented the water element, a red dragon that represented the fire element, and a yellow dragon that represented the earth element. After the 4 dragons were condensed, they each let out a dragon roar and flew towards Nangongzhe with a majestic aura. They wrapped around Nangongzhe's body and slowly flew towards the center of the formation with Nangongzhe. When Nangongzhe stood firmly in the center of the formation, the 4 dragons also rushed towards the center of the formation under Nangongzhe's feet. In an instant, the formation under Nangongzhe's feet became particularly dazzling. Even with Nangongzhe's eyesight, he was a little dazzled by the strong light at this moment. We actually face each other like this again. This really makes me feel that it's a little fun. Nangongzhe heard a familiar voice in his ear. This voice was really too familiar to Nangongzhe, because this was his own voice. The only thing that could possibly have the same voice as him was his own inner demon that had been sealed in his spiritual space. It turned out to be like this. Nangongzhe seemed to have figured out something. The trial actually began the moment I stepped on the back of the golden dragon. The mysterious power that let you get out of my control came from the golden dragon, right? Nangongzhe looked at his inner demon and said his guess. I didn't know where the power came from at first, but until just now, when you activated this formation, a greater power than the beginning rushed into my body again. Even the spiritual power wall you left behind couldn't block this power at all. Even in the end, I could directly appear in front of you with the power of the formation. Sure enough, even the heavens couldn't bear to see you humiliating the heavens' retribution sword, so they gave me a second chance to fight with you? The inner demon smiled and recounted what she had just experienced to her true self. As long as I can kill you, I can rely on the power of the formation to completely replace you and become the true Yama of the shinobi world. Without the home field advantage of the spiritual space, what can you use to fight me? Without hesitation, the inner demon said his purpose. Presumably, in the consciousness of the inner demon, he was suppressed by Nangongzhe in the spiritual space because of Nangongzhe's control of the spiritual space. As long as he doesn't have such a disadvantage, the two of them are almost on the same level. The inner demon is more ruthless than Nangongzhe. It doesn't seem impossible to defeat Nangongzhe and replace Nangongzhe. It seems that the requirement of this level is to eliminate the inner demon by myself. It's interesting, since this trial gave me such an opportunity, how can I not grasp it well? As long as I can eliminate this inner demon this time, I think I will have a huge improvement, right? Nangongzhe didn't care that his inner demon was still standing in front of him. He had already begun to think about the various benefits after he defeated the inner demon. When the inner demon saw Nangongzhe's attitude, it naturally burned with anger, even its face became ferocious. Sure enough, although the inner demon is more insidious and ruthless, after all, the inner demon is an existence formed by some negative emotions. Compared to me, it is more irritable and extreme. When the mentality is unbalanced, it will lead to more flaws in the inner demon. The two of us are one. My inner demon is also clear in my heart. If I want to defeat the inner demon, I can only start from the loopholes in its emotions. That's right, what Nangongzhe said before was just a test of his own guesses. It was also the key to Nangongzhe's belief that he could defeat his inner demon. Although the inner demon didn't say it before, Nangongzhe knew that the inner demon must have received some kind of blessing from the formation, otherwise, it wouldn't be so confident to say that it will kill him and then replace him. Perhaps, the inner demon's combat power at this moment is much higher than his. The inner demon seemed to have become in a state of uncontrollable anger. It pulled out the long sword in its hand that looked exactly the same as the disaster sword and rushed towards Nangongzhe. At first, the inner demon's pace didn't change, it was as if it was rushing straight. However, halfway through, two figures suddenly split from the inner demon's body. It was as if the inner demon had forcibly turned into 3 people. As a cultivator of internal force, he can't use ninjutsu like a ninja who cultivates chakra, but he can rely on his own speed to create illusions. Even if it was practiced to a high level, it would be able to replace any illusionary body at any time to attack the enemy. Nangongzhe also knew this move, but it didn't seem to be as smooth as the inner demon's. Nangongzhe carefully looked at the 3 figures of the inner demon, but found that he couldn't determine which one was the true body of the inner demon. Sure enough, This formation has a special effect on the inner demon. Since he couldn't determine which one was the true body, he would just block all of them. The three figures of the inner demon had already arrived in front of Nangongzhi in an instant, and the three of them attacked at the same time. One used a long sword to stab Nangongzhi's eyebrows, one used a sword to cut Nangongzhi's right arm, and the last figure bent down, as if it wanted to cut Nangongzhi's hamstring. As long as he could see the movements of the inner demon, Nangongzhi was confident that he could compete with the inner demon. Nangongzhi raised his left foot and stepped on the sword that was about to cut his hamstring. However, he didn't feel like he stepped on it at all. Obviously, it was just an illusion. With a wave of his right hand, the disaster sword's edge cut the throat of the inner demon that wanted to cut off his right arm, but it still felt like an illusion. "It's you." Nangongzhi pushed out his left hand with internal force and directly slapped the abdomen of the inner demon that wanted to stab the sword between his eyebrows. Chapter 174. Nangongzhi felt the illusory sensation again. He knew that the inner demon who was holding a long sword and was about to stab him between his eyebrows was also an illusion. A gust of wind came from behind his head. Was this the killing move of the inner demon? Nangongzhi quickly swept the long sword in his hand behind him. The sound of metal clashing could be heard. It was a close call. Nangongzhi blocked the true killing move of the inner demon. "I thought that splitting into 2 phantoms was your limit, but I didn't expect you to be able to split into 3 phantoms so vividly." Nangongzhi exerted force on his feet to create distance between himself and the inner demon. However, the inner demon was extremely fast. It was almost sticking to Nangongzhi's retreating figure. The distance between the two did not increase at all. Instead, it got closer. "There are many things that you don't know." The inner demon looked at Nangongzhi's face and said with a strange smile. "Indeed, this array formation has given you quite a bit of power. These footwork techniques that create illusions are still in their embryonic form in my mind, but you are already proficient in using them?" Nangongzhi looked at the inner demon and said calmly, "But, relying on the formation's support for you, is it really fun to use such a method to defeat me?" Nangongzhi was not so much a ninja as he was a more traditional cultivator. Every time he fought with others, Nangongzhi hoped to use his own skills to fight. Nangongzhi did not reject the idea. After all, Nangongzhi often wore Li Yang's black armor to fight. However, as long as it was a problem that could be solved with his own strength, Nangongzhi rarely summoned Li Yang. "As expected of my original body. You're so stubborn." The inner demon looked at Nangongzhi and said sarcastically, "I don't care if you're stubborn or pretentious. Only the power that was truly cultivated by oneself was the most suitable power for oneself. This is my own request, it has nothing to do with anyone else." Nangongzhi did not lose his composure because of the inner demon's mockery. He continued to speak calmly. "Then you can hold on to your pitiful pride and let me kill you and replace you. My true body." The demon slowly sank to the bottom of the lake and disappeared from Nangongzhi's sight. Only this sentence was left, still echoing in the surrounding space. Nangongzhi knew that the inner demon was only temporarily gone. Now, the inner demon was like a venomous snake staring at its prey. As long as there was a chance, the inner demon would never be soft-hearted and bite him viciously. Nangongzhi held the Heaven's Calamity Sword in his hand and slightly arched his back. His mind was completely focused. Swish! Nangongzhi suddenly jumped up, and a sword chi shot out from the water where Nangongzhi was just standing. Before Nangongzhi fell from the sky, several more sword chi shot out. Each sword chi was aimed at the vital parts of Nangongzhi's body. Nangongzhi, who was in the air, had lost his footing. If this continued, his body would soon be pierced by the sword chi. "You're not the only one who knows how to control sword chi." Nangongzhi shook the Heaven's Calamity Sword in his hand. A sword chi shot out from the Heaven's Calamity Sword and directly slashed under Nangongzhi's feet. Nangongzhi saw the opportunity and stepped on the sword chi. He suddenly used his agile body technique and his body jumped up like a bird. Nangongzhi moved to the side and dodged several sword chis. The remaining sword chis were also destroyed by Nangongzhi's Heavenly Calamity Sword. Come out! Nangongzhi shouted. More and more sword chi was born from the Heaven's Calamity Sword. In an instant, dozens of sword chi had already wrapped around Nangongzhi's body. Nangongzhi held the Heaven Calamity Sword and pointed it downwards. Suddenly, Nangongzhi fell towards the surface of the lake like a 1,000-pound weight. Bang! The huge force directly shook the lake water into mist, and at the same time, it also made a huge sound. The moment the tip of the sword touched the lake, the sword chi wrapped around Nangongzhi's body flew in the direction of the Heaven's Calamity Sword. Like sharks hunting for their prey, Nangongzhi's sword chi wandered around the lake, killing everything in its path. Nangongzhi obviously wanted to use this method to force his inner demon out of the lake so that it would be easier for him to fight it. The sword chi's effect was very obvious. The inner demon's body that was hidden in the lake was forcibly forced out. There was even a small tear at the corner of the inner demon's clothes. It must have been caused by the sword chi that was injected into the lake. The inner demon did not speak. He just held the long sword in his hand and rushed towards Nangongzhi. This time, there were no afterimages because the inner demon knew that this was a trick that could only be used once. His original body must be on guard against his doppelgangers. Since that was the case, he might as well fight directly. The long sword in the inner demon's hand trembled slightly. There were even some phantoms on the body of the sword. Using this method of vibration to increase the speed and strength of the long sword in his hand was really a good trick. Nangongzhi sighed slightly in his heart. However, he did not directly apply it to his swordsmanship. Although this method was simple, it required a lot of practice to integrate this trick into his swordsmanship. Otherwise, he would be a complete troublemaker. The power of his swordsmanship might be reduced because he was not familiar with the technique. Just as he was about to get close to Nangongzhi, the inner demon's arms suddenly moved. The high speed made the inner demon look like he had 2 more arms. This was not a trick like the previous illusion. As long as the inner demon was willing, each of the illusionary long swords would be a full blow. Nangongzhi was very familiar with this swordsmanship. It was the fatal 13 swords that his sister, Nangongro, had taught him a long time ago. The fatal 13 swords was a swordsmanship that did not care about the form. Every move was a fight to the death. Every move was filled with murderous intent. The inner demon's temperament was different from his. When he used the fatal 13 swords, he was filled with murderous intent. Nangongzhi also raised the Heaven's Disaster Sword in his hand and fought against the inner demon's moves. Even if he did not have the same power as the inner demon when he used the fatal 13 swords, Nangongzhi was someone who had completely mastered the fatal 13 swords. Nangongzhi still had a certain degree of confidence in the most basic way of countering each move. Chapter 175. Chi? A trail of blood quietly appeared on Nangongzhi's face. Nangongzhi was still sweating because of the frightening moment just now. Originally, with Nangongzhi's understanding of the fatal 13 swords, although there was a certain gap in strength and speed between him and the inner demon, who had been strengthened by the formation, he could still rely on his skills to deal with the inner demon. However, just now, the inner demon used a move that Nangongzhi had never seen before. It was a move that was derived from the fatal 13 swords. This move was almost a perfect display of the ruthlessness of the fatal 13 swords. At that moment, the inner demon's murderous aura was so frightening that it almost froze Nangongzhi's movements. Watching the blade getting closer and closer to his face, Nangongzhi used all the strength in his body to move again. However, his face was still scratched by the blade, leaving a bloody scar. This move, Nangongzhi looked at the inner demon and said with lingering fear, "Don't you remember? When you obtained the fatal 13 swords and practiced it to the extreme, you had a wisp of inspiration." With the inner demon's reminder, Nangongzhi finally remembered that when he practiced the fatal 13 swords, he vaguely felt that the fatal 13 swords should not stop at the 13th move. However, he had been trying to deduce it but to no avail. Therefore, he did not continue to deduce it. "This is the 14th sword?" Nangongzhi looked at the inner demon and said the answer. Compared to the 14th sword, which was almost like a demonic sword, The first 13 swords of the fatal 13 swords were like green leaves against a red flower. Endless ruthlessness and murderous aura. The essence of the first 13 swords were gathered in this sword. It was the 14th sword that could be called the Ghost God's sword. You can actually perform such a sword? Nangongzhi was very surprised because this sword only existed in Nangongzhi's consciousness. Compared to the body technique that the inner demon had used to create illusions, this sword technique that was close to the supernatural made Nangongzhi's mind more easily shaken. That's right. What you can do, what you can't do, I can easily do. What can you use to win against me? Why don't you just obediently stretch out your neck and let me inherit everything you have? With my strength, wouldn't protecting those girls be a piece of cake? The inner demon looked at Nangongzhi with disdain and disdain. He, who was able to display a sword move that was close to that of a supernatural being, was indeed qualified to look at Nangongzhi with disdain. Nangongzhi did not speak. He only held the Heaven's Disaster Sword tighter in his hand. His slightly trembling hands held the Heaven's Disaster Sword in front of him. Although he did not speak, it was obvious that Nangongzhi was unwilling to give up everything he had. He's stubborn. But that's good. This way, I can fight to my heart's content and vent the resentment that you have suppressed me for all these years. The inner demon still had a strange smile on his face as he attacked Nangongzhi with his sword. Although it was still the fatal 13 swords, it seemed that the ruthlessness of the fatal 13 swords had increased because of the 14th sword move. On the other hand, Nangongzhi had already lost in terms of confidence because of the 14th sword just now. Although Nangongzhi was still trying his best to parry every sword attack from the inner demon, he was getting more and more powerless. Nangongzhi blocked the inner demon's sword with the Heaven's Disaster Sword. However, his hand that was holding the sword also fell to the side of his body because of the huge force. The web between his thumb and forefinger was even slightly cracked because of the strength of the inner demon's sword. Traces of blood seeped into the sword hilt. Some sticky blood stained the sword hilt, making Nangongzhi feel that the Heaven's Disaster Sword was very heavy at this moment. The Heaven's Disaster Sword even looked like it was about to fall out of his hand. Look at your current sorry state. You can't even hold the sword properly and you still want to fight with me? Don't joke around. The inner demon sneered at Nangongzhi. With your current state, what right do you have to fight with others? What right do you have to swear that you can protect everything you want to protect? Instead of letting you go out and make a fool of yourself, you don't even know when you will silently die in the hands of others. Why don't you just let me end you? What's the point of saying so many useless things? If you want to fight, then let's fight. At the beginning of the battle, Nangongzhi wanted to use sarcasm to disturb the inner demon's state of mind. However, at this moment, every word of the inner demon was like a sharp thorn that attacked Nangongzhi. Nangongzhi couldn't help but have a trace of doubt in his heart. Could he really accomplish all the things that he had hoped for with the current him? In order to adjust his state of mind, Nangongzhi could only shout loudly, trying to expel every word of the inner demon from his mind. The inner demon's mouth curved into a smile. It seemed that it was very satisfied with Nangongzhi's current state. It turned its body and stabbed its long sword at a strange angle. This time, Nangongzhi didn't block the inner demon's sword like before. Instead, a trace of his shikigami appeared. The inner demon's long sword directly slashed past Nangongzhi's neck. A strand of black hair fell to the ground beside Nangongzhi. The inner demon could have directly taken Nangongzhi's life with this sword. However, when the long sword was about to slash Nangongzhi's throat, the inner demon quietly moved the long sword to the side and only took away a strand of Nangongzhi's hair. The smile on its face was like a cat that was teasing a mouse. It was so calm and so cruel. Isn't this interesting? The inner demon seemed to treat teasing Nangongzhi as a way to relieve its boredom. Its eyes were filled with satisfaction. Nangongzhi drew his sword. He poured his chaotic thoughts into the sword and stabbed the inner demon with a fierceness that was different from before. Didn't you look down on my fighting style? But now, every move of yours is very similar to my swordsmanship. Which one of us is more like a clown who wants to make others laugh? The inner demon looked at Nangongzhi's sword. It just casually waved the long sword in its hand and broke Nangong's swordsmanship. It even took a step forward and kicked Nangong's. Nangong's directly fell onto the surface of the lake, looking indescribably embarrassed. Deity! Nangong's. Would Li Fiamma. Have you seen a dog? Look at you now. Aren't you a mad dog that has lost its mind due to anger? A mad dog like you should use blood and pain to teach you who is the master of life and death. The inner demon walked to Nangong's side and stepped directly on Nangong's back. Nangong, who was struggling to stand up and continue fighting, was mercilessly stepped on to the surface of the lake. Nangong's face was reflected on the surface of the lake, which made Nangong extremely frustrated. Chapter 176. To be honest, I'm a little tired of looking at your face. Forget it, I'll just get rid of you as soon as possible. The inner demon originally wanted to play with his main body, but when he looked at his main body's face, he couldn't help but feel irritated. Therefore, the inner demon placed the long sword in his hand beside Nangong's neck. With a light slash, his main body's life would end at this moment, and a brand new Nangong who could truly bear the title of Yama would be born. To be honest, the inner demon felt that this was the best way to go. However, since when was Nangong someone who would stretch out his neck to be slaughtered? Thinking back to the water dragon arch illusion, Nangong knew that he couldn't give up so easily when his inner demon faced Nangong Ro, Mashiro, and Little Linger. There were still many people waiting for him to protect and guard, right? Nangong shifted his gaze away from his face reflected on the surface of the lake, and stared at the long sword in the inner demon's hand. He suddenly exerted force on his body, and forcibly pushed away the inner demon's foot that was on his back. Using the calamity sword in his hand to meet the inner demon's long sword, Nangong's strength was inferior to the inner demon's. Under the influence of the inner demon's long sword, Nangong's body slid fiercely in the opposite direction, sticking close to the surface of the lake. When the inner demon saw his main body's actions, his face turned extremely ugly. I say, you clearly can't beat me at all. Can't you just die properly? Why do you have to force yourself to fight me? You're really troublesome. The inner demon clicked his tongue impatiently and looked at Nangong with great impatience. How can I give up so easily? Nangong wasn't in a good spot either. Just now, in order to borrow the strength of the Heart Devil sword to escape the attack range of the Heart Devil, he didn't use too much strength. Even his internal organs had suffered some injuries due to the forceful impact. Blood was flowing out of Nangong's nostrils. Then, I will finish you with one move. The inner demon watched Nangong as if he was watching a disgusting cockroach as he slowly raised his sword. The hand holding the sword moved closer to his ear, while the other hand gently stroked the sword's spine. The sound of fingernails rubbing against the blade was very clear. As the sound of friction gradually spread, the inner demon fell into a strange state. His pair of eyes, which originally had some black luster, were instantly covered by black. Even when he breathed in and out, a faint black mist would escape from his eyes. The murderous aura was released from his body without any concealment. A large part of it flowed into the long sword in the inner demon's hand, while the rest rushed towards Nangong. The situation was extremely similar to when Nangong was injured. The moment the murderous aura approached Nangong's body, it changed from an invisible state. Like concrete cooling, the murderous aura enveloped Nangong, restricting his movements. Nangong couldn't even move. Only one of his eyes could slowly turn and see what was happening around him. This was the essence of the fatal 13 swords, the fatal 14th sword that was like a red flower. Kill! The inner demon suddenly spat out such a word. His voice was hoarse and choppy, like a person who hadn't spoken for many years suddenly opening his mouth. However, as soon as the inner demon said the word, kill, the black that lingered in his eyes quickly faded away. His eyes had completely turned white, and there were even some ferocious blood streaks on them. No matter who it was, being stared at by such an eye would cause fear to emerge in their hearts, let alone Nangong who was facing the inner demon. A bone-chilling chill emerged from Nangong's heart. It turned out that the sudden attack from the inner demon wasn't the fatal 14th sword at all. Now, the inner demon had completely condensed his murderous aura, his resentment, and his crazy desire to kill into his sword. Using the murderous aura to solidify the opponent's movements, using the demonic eye to stimulate the opponent's mind, and finally using the long sword in his hand to give the opponent a fatal blow. Converge, condense, solidify, a sword that was like a ghost, a sword that belonged to a ghost. Was this the fatal 14th sword that belonged to the inner demon? Previously, Nangongja had used all his strength to break free from the weakened version of the fatal 14th sword, barely saving his life. Then, how could Nangongja resist the complete version of the fatal 14th sword? The sword edge with murderous aura and cold air was getting closer and closer to Nangongja. The tip of Nangongja's nose seemed to have a thin layer of frost because of the cold air on the sword edge. Was he really going to die in the hands of his inner demon? Nangongja looked at the inner demon and looked at the long sword in his hand. At this moment, he suddenly felt that time had slowed down. He could only stand there motionlessly and watch as the inner demon stabbed the sword in his hand towards his vital parts and took his life away. Time really seemed to have slowed down. Nangongja was trapped in the murderous aura, but his heartbeat and breathing reminded him that time really seemed to have slowed down. The Heaven's Calamity sword in his hand became slightly hot, making Nangongja's palm feel like it was being burned. But this was too strange. The flow of time actually slowed down? Nangongja's eyes suddenly became blurry. The inner demon was no longer there, and the ghost-like sword of the inner demon was no longer there. The lake, the thick fog, and the array had all disappeared without a trace in an instant. There was only one person standing in front of him, holding a brush with ink. He held the brush in his hand as if he was holding a long sword. With a light stroke, he left an ink mark on the paper in front of him. That person's face was the banishment senior that Nangongja was very familiar with. The state of banishment and the state of banishment when he waved the brush in his hand was very similar to the state of the inner demon when he used the 14th sword. However, Nangongja carefully observed and found that this was not the case. The 14th sword that the inner demon used was to pour everything into the sword in his hand, whether it was murderous aura or resentment. He let the sword become his own and let the sword become the dominant existence. There seemed to be no such thing as the inner demon in the world. There was only the sword and the target that the sword wanted to kill. Chapter 177. However, banishment and the inner demon were completely different. Senior banishment did not turn himself into a sword. Instead, he used his soul to wrap around the brush in his hand that he had used as a sword. He used his mind to carefully feel everything about the brush. Regardless of whether it was the scratches on the brush or the state of each hair on the brush, they were all deeply imprinted in his mind by banishment. Then, the brush actually formed a strange resonance with banishment's breathing and the inner energy in banishment's body. That's right. The inner demon turned himself into the sword in his hand, but senior banishment turned the sword into himself. Using the sword to control the person and using the person to control the sword, the difference was very obvious. Nangongja finally understood what the scroll painting in the Arch of the Earth Dragon Gate wanted him to comprehend. It was this kind of sword that turned the sword into his own sword. The seal of killing intent seemed to no longer exist, and Nangongja's body could actually move. Nangongja's right hand slowly rose, and Nangongja's left hand grasped the hilt of the sword. This was the most basic move when one first started cultivating the sword, the most fundamental slash. Nangongja closed his eyes. There was no lake under his feet, no clouds around him, no fatal sword from the inner demon, no breath, and no heartbeat. There was only one Nangongja, and only one Heaven's Calamity sword. Nangongja felt the Heaven's Calamity sword, and the Heaven's Calamity sword felt Nangongja. Whether it was the feeling of helplessness or the fear of facing the inner demon slash, it seemed to have been instantly destroyed by the Heaven's Calamity sword. The Heaven's Calamity sword was very happy. It was happy that its master had finally calmed down and no longer had so many distracting thoughts. It only held itself and simply wanted to slash. Nangongzhi was so happy that he could actually feel the emotions of the heavenly calamity sword. It was not dissatisfied with him not being able to drink blood to its heart's content, nor was it afraid of the inner demons. The heavenly calamity sword only wanted to slash down to its heart's content. His mouth opened slightly, but his weak voice resounded through the clouds like the morning bell and the evening drum. It also echoed in Nangongzhi's heart. The vital energy of heaven and earth, vast and everlasting. Nangongzhi's heart and Nangongzhi's tribulation sword merged into one. Nangongzhi's inner energy and Nangongzhi's sword qi. At this moment, Nangongzhi's spiritual power and everything about Nangongzhi was surging into the heavenly tribulation sword without any restraint. I'm not asking for immortal slaying. Nangongzhi's voice was no longer faintly discernible. Instead, it was extremely clear. But I beg to slay demons and gods. Sword of ghosts and gods? Inner demons? Nangongzhi did not care. If it was demons and gods, then he would use this sword to slay demons and gods. If it was an inner demon, then he would use this sword to destroy it. What is this? What is this? Impossible, impossible, this is clearly my victory. I can clearly replace you and become a new life. What right do you have to use this sword to extinguish all my hopes? From the moment Nangongzhi's body could move, when Nangongzhi placed the heavenly calamity sword in his hand in front of his chest, the inner demon had already sensed it. However, this world-destroying 14th sword had already been slashed out. Everything was controlled by the sword in the inner demon's hand. The inner demon could not stop his sword, nor was he willing to stop his sword. Endless hatred and killing intent surged out from the inner demon's body. Even the inner demon's body had become somewhat illusory. The inner demon burned his own foundation, producing even more killing intent and resentment to nurture the sword in his hand. He only wanted to make this sword stronger, strong enough to kill his own body. However, Nangongzhi did not hear the inner demon's words at all. Nangongzhi had long ago comprehended the Sacrifice Heart Sutra, which was to sacrifice the sword and have no other thoughts. When he comprehended the move, slay demons and gods, Nangongzhi had already pushed his Sacrifice Heart Sutra to an even more profound level. At this moment, Nangongzhi only wanted to slash out with the sword in his hand. The heavenly calamity sword's edge already had a faint pure white light. Although it was very small, it was impossible for people to ignore its existence. The heavenly calamity sword and the sword in the inner demon's hand clashed together. There was no shockwave, nor was there any earth-shattering sound. It was just like the two most ordinary swords clashing together without a trace of smoke or fire. Ding! A crisp sound rang out, and Nangongzhi and the inner demon exchanged positions. The two of them stood back to back, and their hands were still in the same posture as before. However, the sword in the inner demon's hand made such a crisp sound, and cracks like a spider web appeared on the sword. No, it was not just on the sword. These cracks actually spread to the inner demon's body, and traces of white light were emitted from the cracks. The inner demon seemed to want to open his mouth to say something, but he could not even move. In an instant, it was like a porcelain with cracks all over it, turning into fragments that fell onto the lake's surface. The lake's surface did not hold up these fragments like how it held up Nangongzhi's body. Instead, it allowed these fragments to sink into the lake. There were only a few slight ripples, which proved that someone had fought with Nangongzhi here. Nangongzhi also slowly put away the Heaven's Calamity sword in his hand and sheathed it back into the scabbard. His face was pale and fatigued. It was clear that this demon-slaying technique was not easy to execute. To be honest, whether it is the fatal 14th sword or the Heaven's Calamity sword, they are all sword moves of the same level. It is impossible to judge which one is better, using a human to control a sword or using a sword to control a human. The only reason you lost was because your sword wasn't cultivated by yourself. Even if the formation provided you with a sword move that suits you, it is not a sword that belongs to you. Nangongzhi seemed to be talking to the inner demon, but it also seemed like he was talking to himself. There was no dragon pattern token falling from the sky, and only a door appeared in front of Nangongzhi. It did not have the grandeur and domineering aura of the giant dragon arch. It was just a simple wooden door without any decorations. Nangongzhi reached out and grabbed a handle on the wooden door. Kacha, the sound of wood rubbing against each other sounded, and a white light was emitted from the wooden door. Ninja Blood Robe Pavilion. I'm back, I Nangongzhi am back. Are you ready? Nangongzhi said silently in his heart, and firmly stepped forward. Chapter 178. After Nangongzhi entered the path of dragonization, the 5 altar lords did not leave the headquarters of the Blood Cloth Pavilion. Regardless of whether Nangongzhi could pass the path of dragonization or not, the 5 altar lords had the responsibility and obligation to wait for Nangongzhi to finish the trial. If Nangongzhi passed, then Nangongzhi would already be the head of the Blood Cloth Pavilion. It was only right for the 5 altar lords to meet the head of the Blood Cloth Pavilion. If Nangongzhi did not pass, Nangongzhi was also a top expert in the ninja world. The 5 altar lords would not mind forming a good relationship with Nangongzhi, right? At this moment, the 9 dragons painted wall suddenly bloomed with a different kind of brilliance. The brilliance instantly condensed into a huge beam of light. Even the roof above the 9 dragons painted wall was directly hit by the beam of light. The beam of light went straight into the sky and did not dissipate for a long time. Not only the 5 altar lords, even the most ordinary members of the Blood Cloth Pavilion had already seen this brilliant beam of light. Calm down the ordinary disciples. I will go find the remaining altar lords and see what happened to the 9 dragons painted wall. Every time the 9 dragons painted wall was opened before, there was no such scene. After all, this was the territory of the Greenwood altar. Most of the remaining 4 altar lord subordinates were still outside the headquarters of the Blood Cloth Pavilion. Therefore, Old Man Aoki directly gave the order to calm down the basic disciples. Without waiting for the people of the Greenwood altar next to him to answer, Old Man Aoki had already directly left his room at an extremely fast speed. Only the door was left open and the disciples of the Greenwood altar stood there in a daze. Was this still the mature and steady altar lord of the Greenwood altar that he knew? Old Man Aoki ran in the direction of the 9 dragons painted wall as fast as he could. The other altar lords were not stupid. Seeing the abnormality of the 9 dragons painted wall, they must have also moved in the direction of the beam of light. Instead of going to the residences of the altar lords and finding nothing, it was better to rush in the direction of the 9 dragons painted wall first. On the way, they would definitely meet the other altar lords. Greenwood hadn't walked far when a green figure appeared beside Old Man Greenwood. Altar leader Qing Mu, this light pillar from the 9 dragons painted wall is really unusual. Could it be? When Bai Shui saw Qing Mu, he didn't stop, but he still told him his guess. Although he didn't say it clearly, Old Man Qing Mu knew that Bai Shui felt that this matter definitely had something to do with Nangongzhi, who was undergoing the trial on the road of dragon transformation. It's still too early to talk about this. Let's go to the 9 dragons painted wall first. Let's talk about this when we meet up with the other altar masters. Old Man Qing Mu shook his head and didn't let Bai Shui continue. Now that everything was still uncertain, it was best not to make any rash comments. When Greenwood and Bai Shui arrived in front of the 9 dragon painted wall, the other altar lords Rui Jin, Qi Yan, and Ho Tu were already standing in front of the 9 dragon painted wall. Greenwood, Bai Shui, you're here. Rui Jin and Qi Yan were currently staring at the 9 dragon painted wall. They didn't talk to Greenwood and Bai Shui who had just arrived. On the contrary, Ho Tu didn't seem to care about the result of the road of dragon transformation. After seeing Greenwood and Bai Shui, he greeted them in a very good-natured manner. What's the situation now? Greenwood asked Ho Tuesday. The door to the road of dragon transformation on the 9 dragons painted wall has already appeared, but we still haven't seen little friend Nangongzhi come out. Whether he succeeds or fails, we'll know the result very soon. Ho Tu rubbed his head and didn't explain the situation in detail. After all, no one had encountered such a reaction from the 9 dragon painted wall before. In the past, the 9 dragons painted wall would directly open the door when it opened. Then all the people who failed the trial would be forcefully thrown out by a huge force. Now that the huge light pillar had appeared, they felt that they didn't know where to start. Just as the altar lords were discussing the abnormality of the 9 dragon painted wall, a foot stretched out from the door of the 9 dragon painted wall's path of dragon transformation. When the owner of the foot completely walked out of the door of the 9 dragons painted wall, the altar lords saw the face of the owner of the foot clearly. It was Nangongzhi. "You're all still waiting for me here?" Nangongzhi had just come out and saw the altar lords standing in front of the 9 dragons painted wall. He was slightly surprised and said. Greenwood pointed to the sky, and Nangongzhi followed Greenwood's finger and saw the light pillar that shot up into the sky from the 9 dragons painted wall. "So it's like this?" Nangongzhi suddenly smiled a bit awkwardly. Such an entrance was too flashy. "No, this doesn't match my low-key purpose. Little friend, I wonder if you..." Just as Greenwood opened his mouth and wanted to ask Nangongzhi about the result of the 9 dragons painted wall, a blood-red stream of light suddenly flew over from afar and covered Nangongzhi's body. Taking a closer look, it was the blood-stained brocade robe that was enshrined in the hall by the people of the blood-clothed pavilion. It seems that the result is already very clear. Nangongzhi smiled at Old Man Greenwood and reached out his hand to touch the blood-stained robe on his body. "Greetings, Chief. Greetings, Chief. Greetings, Chief." The altar lords immediately half-knelt on the ground and saluted Nangongzhi. Nangongzhi looked at the altar lords half-kneeling in front of him, but he didn't feel the slightest bit of joy of leading a large organization. Instead, he was filled with worry. He had passed such a trial, brought the heavenly calamity sword, and took away the authority of these altar masters. He had even directly sat on their heads. No one would be willing to have someone sitting on their head so easily, let alone the 5 powerful and authoritative internal strength cultivators of the blood-clothed pavilion. He didn't know how much trouble he would have to face in the future. However, at this moment, Nangongzhi couldn't reveal his thoughts. He could only hurriedly hold the arms of Old Man Greenwood and Altar Lord Ho-Tu, who were closest to him, and said to the 5 altar lords at the same time, "There's no need to be so polite. I'm also new here, so there are many things that I'm not familiar with and understand. In the future, I hope that we can work together to make the blood-clothed pavilion stronger. Everyone please get up." After Nangongzhi finished speaking, he took the lead to help Greenwood and Ho-Tu up. Then, he went to the other 3 altar lords and helped them up one by one. We're all people who have passed the dragonization path, so we know best how difficult it is. Since you can pass the dragonization path, you naturally have a mind and strength that surpasses ours. Therefore, we must support you with all our strength and make the blood-clothed pavilion stronger. Rui Jin went to Nangongzhi's side and told him the same thing. The other altar lords also nodded one by one. If outsiders saw the state of the 5 altar lords and Nangongzhi at this moment, they would definitely give a thumbs up and praise them for being very harmonious. Chapter 179. Chief, although you have passed the path of dragonization and obtained the recognition of the Blood Cloak of Banishment Senpai, but we still need a ceremony to tell all the Blood Cloak Pavilion disciples that we have a chief, so... Aoki stepped forward and said to Nangongzhi, "Aoki-sama, you don't have to worry about it. Since I have become the chief of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, I naturally have to let all the Blood Cloak Pavilion disciples know about my existence. Otherwise, wouldn't it be a joke if the general doesn't know his soldiers? I don't know if you have already made any arrangements?" Nangongzhi smiled and said to the altar lords, "Although our Blood Cloak Pavilion is not a particularly large organization, we still have many disciples. Most of the disciples under my command are responsible for logistics, and many of them have been scattered all over the ninja world to run some business. Sharp Metal Altar and Scarlet Flame Altar led by Sharp Metal Altar and Scarlet Flame Altar are responsible for all kinds of military missions, and almost none of them are left. In order to cooperate with the various actions of Sharp Metal Altar and Scarlet Flame Altar, a large number of disciples of Deep Earth Altar also follow them to perform missions. The disciples of Clearwater Altar are mainly responsible for hiding, spying, and sometimes carrying out some assassination missions. Therefore, it is not realistic to have all the disciples gather at the headquarters. Aoki's face was a little embarrassed. In fact, Nangong's meaning was very obvious. He hoped that he could meet all the members of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. But now, he had to directly reject the proposal of his new boss, which really made Aoki feel uncomfortable all over. But as the oldest and most experienced of the 5 altar lords, Aoki couldn't help but feel uncomfortable. Aoki had to tell Nangong that he could only accept the situation of, the general doesn't know his soldiers, and the soldiers don't know his generals. Nangong didn't show any displeasure on his face. Instead, he had a gentle smile. When Aoki spoke, Nangong nodded from time to time, as if he felt that there was no problem with Aoki's statement. I was too rash. If you want to maintain the stability and development of an organization, then the members of an organization must not stay at the headquarters without doing anything. Since we can't get all the disciples of the Blood Garment Pavilion here, how are we going to carry out the succession ceremony? The few of us have discussed it. If you can accept it, we will gather all the middle-level and high-level cadres who are free. We will let you meet them and conduct the succession ceremony together. In this way, not only would the situation of the general doesn't know his soldiers, and the soldiers don't know his general be avoided, it would also save the disciples from the tiring journey. I wonder if you think this is a good idea? Aoki suggested to Nangong, and the other altar lords nodded in agreement. Obviously, they did not have any objections. Perhaps these people had already discussed this solution when Nangong entered the path of dragon transformation? Your Excellency, Aoki's suggestion is somewhat feasible. I wonder how long it will take for all the middle-level and high-level members to gather? Nangong didn't argue with Aoki about the details of the succession ceremony. After all, the altar lords must have discussed it with each other. Currently, Nangong was not very clear about the various information about the Blood Garment Pavilion, so he would definitely face such a situation now. This was normal. Nangong also knew that he would inevitably face such a deadlock. This was also something that he had to go through to truly take charge of the Blood Garment Pavilion. If he could solve this problem well, then Nangong would be the official Blood Garment Pavilion's chief. If he couldn't solve this problem, then he would just be a mascot. In that case, he would just take on the title of first seat and become a good mascot. If there was any battle that required Nangong's assistance, he would have to fight to the death for the Blood Clothing Pavilion. Because all the cadres are scattered all over the place, it will take some time to gather them. If everything goes well, I think they will all be gathered in about a month. During this time, we can also prepare for the succession ceremony. If you don't mind, you can take a look at our Blood Garment Pavilion's records and ancient books during this time. You can learn about the Blood Garment Pavilion. Bai Shui was in charge of intelligence work. This kind of information was given to Nangong by Bai Shui. There's nothing wrong with that. It's only a month. I still have the patience to read some of the Blood Garment Pavilion's records and ancient books. Of course, it's natural. What's there to mind? Nangong nodded. He felt that what Bai Shui said was very reasonable and there was nothing to doubt. Then, Chief, we will take our leave first to make arrangements. Next, let Bai Shui take the altar lord to the chief's room and bring the records and ancient books. Is that okay? Aoki, Qi Yen, Rui Jin, and Ho Tu all bowed one by one, indicating that they wanted to leave first to deal with various matters. Of course. You all go. Bai Shui and I will go to the chief's room. Nangong waved his hand, indicating that the 4 altar lords could leave for the time being. He followed Bai Shui's guidance to a room on the top floor of the Blood Garment Pavilion. This room had a somewhat rustic appearance. There were no decorative ornaments. There were only a few bookshelves, an office desk, and a few chairs. Although this place looked very clean, it was obvious that people often came here to tidy it up. However, it appeared very cold and cheerless. There was no sign of life. This is the chief's room. It's mainly used for office work. The living quarters are elsewhere. Later, if you need to rest, just call for the servants at the door. They will naturally take you to a place to rest. As Bai Shui spoke, he walked to the side of a bookshelf in the room. He opened the empty bookshelf and pressed a button at a corner of the bookshelf. The bookshelf shrank inwards towards the wall, and in its place was a somewhat small dark room. In addition to a few oil lamps providing illumination in the dark room, there were several rows of bookshelves. There were many books and scrolls on them. Some of the books and scrolls had a lot of dust on them. It was obvious that they had been there for a long time. These are some of the ancient books and records of our Blood Garment Pavilion's various activities. Apart from me, the Altar Lord, and you, the Chief, no one else can enter here. Bai Shui picked from the bookshelf and took out a book that wasn't too thin and held it in his hand. He then walked to Nangong's side and placed a few books in Nangong's hands. These are some of the basic information of our Blood Garment Pavilion. You can take a look at them. Bai Shui's face carried a slight smile, but Nangong's expression became somewhat strange. However, he quickly restrained himself. Chapter 180. Looking at Bai Shui's departing figure, Nangong's left hand tightened as if he was holding onto something. Nangong scanned the room with his immense mental power in an instant. After making sure that there was nothing to monitor him, Nangong took a few steps forward and closed the door. Sitting on the chair behind the desk, Nangong casually placed the blood-red robe that belonged to the banishment elder to the side. He then took out the thing in his left hand. It was a scroll that looked a little old. The words, "Action Record," were directly written on the scroll. "This Bai Shui, what is the meaning of secretly stuffing the scroll into my hands? Is there something else that can't be exposed?" Nangong was a little puzzled because he basically didn't have any contact with a hidden force like the Blood-Red Robe Pavilion. What did their actions have to do with him? Not to mention, this seemed to be an action record from a long time ago. For some unknown reason, Nangong's heart began to feel a little irritable. Nangong held the scroll in his hand and didn't open it for a long time. Why is this? Why is my heart so unsettled? Nangong didn't know what was wrong with him. Even the scroll in his hand was stuffed into Nangong's chest, and he didn't look at it again. Should I go to the Lion Clan's alternate space to see my sister, Mashiro, and Little Linger? During the trial, what the inner demon did to the three girls in the illusion made Nangong want to see them very much. Nangong walked to a slightly wider area in the office and inserted the Heaven's Disaster Sword into the ground. A formation instantly spread out and burst out with a faint but very conspicuous brilliance. With a flash of brilliance, Nangong's figure disappeared from the office of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. Several altar masters simultaneously felt the spatial fluctuations coming from Nangong's office, but none of them cared. They just continued with their work. However, the brilliance in their eyes proved that they were not as calm as they appeared to be. With a flash of light, Nangong's figure appeared in front of the small house built from pure white in the Lion Clan's alternate space. She gently pushed open the door and saw Mashiro sitting in the courtyard, sewing something with a needle and thread in his hands. Nangong had already walked to Mashiro's side. Mashiro did not even realize that there was an additional person behind him. Perhaps it was because Mashiro felt particularly safe in the Lion Clan's alternate dimension? Sigh. Mashiro let out a long sigh and put the needle and thread and cloth in his hands on the table in front of him. He looked at his masterpiece with some relief. I don't know if Miyagi will like this kind of clothes. The clothes that Mashiro sewed were actually for Nangong. I like it very much. So Miyagi likes it very much. The two of them awkwardly chatted for a while. Wait, Mashiro suddenly felt that something was wrong. Didn't Miyagi leave the alternate dimension to deal with some things in the shinobi world? How could she answer his question? Really? Why do I have such a problem with auditory hallucinations? Mashiro turned around and seemed to be going into the house to pour himself a glass of water. However, he directly bumped into Nangong's arms. Miyagi? You're back? Mashiro realized that Nangong was back, but his eyes didn't dare to look at Nangong. He struggled twice with his hands and broke free from Nangong's arms. Sure enough, Mashiro is still blaming me? Although a large part of the reason why Mashiro broke free from his arms was because of her shyness, But the way she didn't dare to look at Nangongja and the panicked tone made Nangongja feel that Mashiro still hasn't gotten over betraying him. But this kind of thing can't be solved with a few words. In the end, Mashiro needs to walk out of this dead end by himself. So Nangongja also changed the topic and said to Mashiro, "Did you make clothes for me?" As he said that, Nangongja picked up the clothes that Mashiro put on the table. "I learned some clothes making skills from Yabuki, sis. I wanted to make a few sets of clothes for you for a long time. After all, you only have a few sets of clothes and they're already worn out. When I came here, I didn't have much to do, so I asked Li Yang to get me some cloth to try making some." Mashiro rubbed the corner of his clothes from time to time. He didn't have his usual calmness. Instead, he was a little panicked, like a small animal that had never seen a stranger before. "Can I give it a try?" "Oh, of course. I don't have your exact size, so I made the clothes based on my memory. I don't know if it's suitable." Before Mashiro finished his sentence, Nangongja had already put on the clothes that Mashiro made. Different from the slightly longer clothes in the past, the clothes that Mashiro made this time were shorter, and the color was very warm. Wearing it, Nangongja didn't have the cold feeling that he used to have. Instead, he looked very gentle. "Is it suitable?" Nangongja smiled and said to Mashiro. Although Mashiro's clothes-making skills were still a little rough, there were many parts that were a little rough. But Nangongja was very happy that he could wear the clothes made by Mashiro. This made Nangongja feel very warm in his heart. With Nangong-ro, Mashiro, and Little Linger, this was a real home for Nangongja, right? Looking at Nangongja's gentle smile, Mashiro only felt that the anxiety in his heart seemed to be expelled in an instant. All that was left was a slight warmth that warmed his heart. A thin layer of mist uncontrollably appeared in his eyes, and he felt like he was about to cry. Looking at Mashiro, Nangongja gently pressed his hand on Mashiro's head. "During this period of time, I believe that you have endured for a long time and blamed yourself for a long time. It's okay, cry to your heart's content. I'm not only Nangongja, but I'm also your family. Whether you're happy or sad, I have the responsibility to share with you." It would have been better if Nangongja didn't say this, but when he said this, Mashiro's eyes were like a broken dam. Tears rolled down from Mashiro's eyes, and sobs came from his throat. Every time Mashiro faced Nangong-ro, and Little Linger said that she was worried about her brother Nangong, it was a different kind of torture and condemnation for Mashiro. Chapter 181. Sometimes, a woman's thoughts weren't as complicated as a man's. Just like Mashiro. In fact, she didn't need any verbal guidance or spiritual encouragement. As long as you could give her a hug that she could rely on and the right to cry, then women would be so simple. When Mashiro was done crying, she left Nangongja's embrace with red and swollen eyes. Although Mashiro didn't say anything, Nangongja could feel that Mashiro's state was much better than before. "I'm going to find Little Linger and Ro." Mashiro seemed to feel embarrassed for being in Nangongja's embrace. She wiped her eyes and wanted to leave for a while to adjust her emotions. Nangongja took off his unfinished clothes and put on his tattered robe. He said to Mashiro, Okay, you can stay here and tidy up. I'll go find Ruru and the others." Before Mashiro could respond, Nangongja had already disappeared. Mashiro took a few steps forward and picked up Nangongja's unfinished clothes. Nobody knew what she was thinking. Little Linger had Nangongja's imprint on her, so it wasn't difficult to find her. Nangongja quickly sensed and headed towards Nangong-ro's direction. "I'm Lionheart King Arthur. You can't treat me like a dog." Before he arrived, Nangongja heard Arthur Jr.'s voice. Back then, in order to get Xiaoling to take the initiative to go to the Lion Clan's alternate space, Nangongja had ruthlessly sold off the little lion. Who would have thought that little Arthur would still be treated like a puppy? Nangongja could only light a candle for Arthur in his heart. "Arthur, what do you think this is?" Xiaoling's voice sounded. Nangongja was already close to them, so he could vaguely see Xiaoling's figure. Little Linger didn't seem to care about the lion's protest. She smiled and waved something in her hand. If Nangongja wasn't wrong, that was a bone. It must be a piece of bone. Arthur seemed to be attracted by the bone in Little Linger's hand. He stared at the bone in Little Linger's hand and even swallowed his saliva. Please. You're a lion, a lion. Why do you look like you can't walk when you see a bone? You're being treated like a dog. Do you have any complaints? Isn't this all your own fault? Little Linger threw the bone in her hand, and Arthur chased after her excitedly. Nangongjia increased his speed and arrived beside Little Linger. Little Linger was curious about who came to her side. When she saw that it was Nangongjia, she hugged Nangongjia happily. Brother Nangong, you're back. Little Linger missed you so much. Nangongjia looked at Little Linger and smiled. Then he asked Little Linger, is Little Linger happy here? Originally, Xiaoling Air was a little bored, but these days little doggy has been playing with me very happily. Then, there's a big black doggy that teaches Xiaoling Air cultivation, so I'm very happy. Saying this, Xiaoling Air rubbed her little head against Nangongjia chest and said very comfortably, but I'm still the happiest when you're here. Nangongjia was amused by Little Linger's words. A big black dog? Isn't that Li Yang? Did all the lions really turn into poodles? Little Linger, where did Sister Rower go? Little Linger tilted her head and seemed to be thinking. Then she said to Nangongjia, after the fierce-looking uncle and the gentle aunt's injuries were almost healed, they moved out and built a small house for themselves. They lived there with the elder sister called Little Lily. Sister Rower went to deliver some daily necessities to them. She asked Little Linger to stay here and play with Little Linger. She said she would be back soon. Whoa, I'm not a dog. Little Arthur barked from afar and denied Little Linger's title. However, Nangongjia found it strange no matter how he looked at it. Could you please take out the bone in your mouth before denying it? You're not convincing at all like this. Hey! Uchiha Fugaku and Uchiha Mikoto have recovered from their injuries? And they even brought Yuri Koyuri with them? Actually, this was good. Nangongjia didn't want to have too much to do with the Uchiha clan. This was because the members of this clan had their own axes. If it wasn't for the deal he had with Itachi Uchiha to fight against the Danzo, Nangongjia wouldn't have anything to do with this clan. Brother? Nangongrou's figure appeared from afar. As expected, it was his sister. She could recognize Nangongjia from so far away. Yes, I'm back. It was a simple conversation, but it made Nangongjia feel at ease. Previously, when he saw the action record scroll, he felt uneasy. But now he calmed down. Fortunately, there is a poodle here. Otherwise, I would be worried about Little Linger playing here alone. So, Little Arthur is also a Pekingese dog to you? My sister, Uchiha Fugaku and Uchiha Mikoto. After all, it was related to his deal with Itachi. Nangongjia still had to ask about the situation of Uchiha Fugaku and his wife. Their injuries are no longer a problem. These days, the two of them seem to have gotten rid of the shadow of their clan's extermination. Their lives here are quite comfortable. Nangongrou thought for a while and said to Nangongjia, they got rid of it? Sigh, the hatred of their clan's extermination. How can it be so easy to get rid of it? Nangongjia muttered. The speaker didn't mean it, but the listener understood. Nangongrou's gaze slowly became strange. During this period of time, Nangongrou felt that her brothers seemed to have discovered something. Previously, when the two of them quarreled, Nangongjia went out and met Mashiro. The conflict between the two of them was so unreasonable. After these days of thinking, Nangongrou felt that Nangongjia must have touched on the truth that she and her grandfather wanted to hide. However, no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't tell Nangongjia about it. Chapter 182. Looking at Nangongjia's figure sleeping soundly on a simple bamboo bed, Nangongrou could not help but smile. When Nangongjia brought her and Little Linger back to this simple courtyard, he clearly said that he was not tired at all, but he actually fell asleep as soon as he sat on the bed. Her brother could also be said to be a very powerful existence. She reached out her small hand and fiddled with Nangongjia's scattered hair on his forehead as she looked at her brother's face. Nangongrou could not help but feel a little distressed because although Nangongjia was sleeping soundly at this moment, The tiredness on his face could not be concealed. It's really, brother has suffered. For the sake of our livelihood and future, you have to run around everywhere. She gently supported Nangongzhi and wanted to take off Nangongzhi's jacket so that her brother could sleep more comfortably. Just as she took off Nangongzhi's jacket a little, a scroll popped out from Nangongzhi's chest. Nangongro was very surprised that her brother would carry a scroll with him. After all, her brother was a person who did not like to read. She picked up the scroll and held it in her hand as she carefully looked at it. However, at the two ends of the scroll in the middle, there was an imprint that made Nangongro stare straight at it. It was a long sword, and then there was the outline of a piece of clothing behind it. The imprint was blood red, and it was the imprint of the Blood Garment Pavilion. Why is my brother connected to this organization? Nangongro looked at the words, Action Record, written on the cover of the scroll and could not help but reach out her hand, wanting to open the scroll to see what was inside. This organization must not be ignored. This scroll mostly recorded some personnel movements of the Blood Garment Pavilion, from killing people to escorting people. As long as it was related to the operation, it was recorded. Nangongro read faster and faster. It was as if she was reading 10 lines at a glance. However, Nangongro soon stopped reading quickly. She should have found what she was looking for. Her eyes stared at every word on the scroll, and from time to time, she would spit out some intermittent words from her mouth. Chasing the murderer. Slaughtering the village. No results. Tien. When she read the last word, Scarlet Flame, Nangongro gritted her teeth as if she had seen something that hurt her the most. It's really the Blood Garment Pavilion? It's really Chien. Grandfather's speculation was right. Although they were all ninjas, the leader was not a ninja. Instead, it was a cultivator who cultivated internal strength like us. Was it just for the Calamity Sword? As she spoke, Nangongro looked at the sword that Nangongzhi put on the table, the Calamity Sword. Originally, Nangongro was taking off Nangongzhi's coat. She had only taken off half of it when she saw the scroll. Thus, she forgot that her brother was still in an extremely uncomfortable position. No matter how tired Nangongzhi was, he could not sleep at this moment. He could only let out 2 coughs instinctively, allowing Nangongro to leave her world. Is there a problem with this scroll? Seeing that his sister's state was obviously not right, Nangongzhi asked. Brother, where did you get this scroll? Nangongro did not answer Nangongzhi's question, but instead asked Nangongzhi. Oh right. I was afraid that you would be worried before, so I didn't tell you. This time I went to the ninja world to subdue the legacy of the master of the Calamity Sword, the Banishment Senpai, an organization called the Blood Garment Pavilion. Now I am the head of the Blood Garment Pavilion. Nangongzhi only spoke halfway, but Nangongro stared at him. Nangongro's tone was even more strange as she said to Nangongzhi, Where did you get it? Although Nangongzhi did not understand what happened to his sister, he still said truthfully, I was recognized as the head, but I still needed to go through some ceremonies. So the altar lords of the Blood Cloth Pavilion looked for some information about the Blood Cloth Pavilion. But at that time, the Blood Cloth Pavilion's 5 elemental altars Jade Water altar lords secretly put this scroll in my hands. What's wrong with this scroll? Because Bai Shui's behavior at that time was really strange. Nangongzhi couldn't help but think of the time when Bai Shui quietly put this scroll in his hands. Although her face was very calm, her eyes were full of playfulness. It was precisely because of this strange playfulness that Nangongzhi didn't immediately open the scroll after obtaining it. Instead, he kept the scroll in his bosom and went to the Lion Clan's alternate space to find the 3 girls and report his safety. Brother, you already know, right? Instead of continuing the topic of the scroll, Nangongro suddenly asked such a question. Although Nangongzhi's face was calm, his heart was already set off a huge wave. Know what? Is it about the scroll or about, I don't know what you're talking about. Know what? Ruru, is there something you're hiding from your brother? Nangongzhi didn't know why he said such a thing, but Nangongzhi instinctively wanted to avoid this topic. In the Water Dragon Arch, after the truth was exposed, Nangongro's appearance was so clear in Nangongzhi's mind. Nangongzhi was very afraid, very afraid that everything would become the same as in the illusion. Brother, you're not the only one who knows how strong Grandpa's seal is. I know it very well too. Even though Grandpa sacrificed his life, at that time, he was already close to the end of his life. A seal is, after all, a dead thing. It can work for a while, but it doesn't mean it can work for a lifetime, right? Nangong Ro knew very well that at this time, her brother's strength had far surpassed her grandpa's peak strength. With such strength, he also had outstanding mental strength. The seal was a container. Although it was big, it had a limit. In addition to her brother's strange behavior a long time ago, Nangong Ro felt that it would be an insult to her intelligence if she still couldn't find out anything. Nangong's eyes turned to the side. He didn't even dare to look at his sister's face. Sure enough. You already know? Nangong Ro looked like she was in pain as she pressed her head. If this scroll didn't appear, I definitely wouldn't talk about this with you. But since this scroll is in front of us, even if it may affect our relationship, you should know about it. Chapter 183. Ro. You. In fact, the two of them were very clear about the secrets between them, but neither of them really revealed the secrets. Because there were some things that they should be honest with each other, but they were still unwilling to say it out loud. In fact, the brother and sister were both entangled, both were nervous, and both were escaping. But now, because of a scroll, Nangong Ro forcibly revealed the secrets that both of them were hiding. Just how important was this scroll? If possible, I also want to live like this with my brother forever. But now that this scroll is in front of me, I can't go against my conscience and continue to hide it from my brother. Nangong Ro said, but her eyes couldn't help but be covered with a layer of mist. Obviously, Nangong Ro's heart was also burning with anxiety. Brother, do you still remember your childhood? Nangong knew that there was no way for him to escape as usual. Since Nangong Ro put these things out in the open, Nangong naturally could only directly say it. When I was young, I lived in a small mountain village. Everything was very peaceful. But in my memory, there is a missing. Without me, your sister, and the grandfather that I mentioned, right? Nangong spoke halfway. Nangong Ro finished Nangong's words. Nangong shook his head, as if his heart was uncomfortable, but he still nodded. That's right, there is no memory of you and that grandfather in my memory. Even my name is not Nangong now. Nangong paused and continued. But one day, a group of ninjas suddenly came out of nowhere. They broke into the small mountain village that I lived in since childhood and began to kill without restraint. They could spit fire from their mouths and they could make the earth collapse. At that time, I was young and I didn't know who they were, but now I am very familiar with them. They are the most powerful people in this world. Ninjas. My memory is very vague, but I still remember that I was stuffed into a relatively secret cellar by my mother. I don't know how long it took, but the cellar collapsed. I was buried inside, and the will to survive made me dig a cave to the surface. But my body was also seriously injured because of the collapse of the cellar and various other reasons. I kept walking away from the village with my will, and then I fainted because of my injuries. But I faintly saw two people, Nangong said, and looked at Nangong Ro. You met me and my grandfather. At that time, your injuries were very serious. In order to save you and allow me to survive in this shinobi world, Grandpa used his own life to seal your memory. He transferred his internal energy to your body and left you this Heaven's Retribution Sword. Nangong Ro glanced at the Heaven's Retribution Sword and said along with Nangong's words, Oni-san, have you tried to find out who destroyed your village and destroyed your peaceful life? Nangong shook his head. My memory is very vague, and those ninjas who attacked my village didn't have any marks on their bodies that could identify their identity. Even if it was ninjutsu, it was some of the most widely spread ninjutsu in the world of ninja. Although I also want to investigate where these people are, there is no clue at all. Nangong Ro looked at her brother, and it seemed that there was some struggle in her eyes. With Oni-Isan's intelligence, you should have already guessed that these ninjas came to the small village that Oni-Isan lived in order to hunt me and my grandfather, right? Nangongzhi nodded. Indeed, Nangongzhi's village was very ordinary. There was nothing that could make the ninjas who stood at the top of the ninja world to come here and kill people. They are here to snatch this Heaven's Retribution Sword. Nangongzhi looked at the Heaven's Retribution Sword, and her voice became a little hoarse. Obviously, she was suppressing her excitement. Heaven's Retribution Sword? Although the Heaven's Retribution Sword is indeed a divine weapon, it doesn't have any significant effect on ninjas. It's not a weapon that can enhance chakra, so it's impossible for ninjas to fight for it so fiercely. Yes, the ones who really want to fight for this Heaven's Retribution Sword are actually a group of people who cultivate internal energy. I think Oni-Isan should already know the various secrets of the Heaven's Retribution Sword, right? Nangongzhi looked at her brother. Although it was a question, she was very certain. The creator of the Blood Cloth Pavilion, the legend of internal energy cultivators, the Sword of the Banishment. Yes, it's the Blood Cloth Pavilion. Nangongzhi nodded. As a large organization, it has always been jointly led by several altar masters. How many people are willing to share the power in their hands with others? Every generation of 5 elemental sanctums' sanctum master wanted to become the true leader of the Blood Garment Pavilion. They want to make the Blood Cloth Pavilion their own say. But no one has succeeded in becoming the head of the Blood Cloth Pavilion. Yes, there has always been no one. So many people cast their eyes on the Heaven's Retribution Sword, which is said to be the symbol of succession. Nangongzhi said the truth clearly. What are ninjas? They are powerful mercenaries. As long as you have money, they don't mind killing people for you and robbing things for you. Killing people? Slaughtering villages? That wasn't a difficult thing to do. Those ninjas were all hired by the Blood Cloth Pavilion? Nangongzhi's eyes were filled with murderous intent. He thought that the Blood Cloth Pavilion was the legacy left to him by the ancestors of the banishment, but he did not expect that the Blood Cloth Pavilion was also a Yama's invitation to his peaceful life since childhood. In this scroll, there is a record of my transfer and the operation of hiring ninjas. Who was the leader? Nangongzhi asked anxiously. Qiyan, Altar Master, Qiyan. Nangongzhi's mind suddenly flashed with the image of an extremely rough and reckless man. However, Nangongzhi thought of another thing. Why did Bai Shui give this record to me? As a large organization, there must be more than one scroll of records of their operations. Yet, Bai Shui had handed this record to me so accurately? Bai Shui is the altar master in charge of intelligence, assassination, and infiltration of the Blood Cloth Pavilion. Only the altar master of Bai Shui and the Blood Cloth Pavilion's head can see these records. Why did Bai Shui show this record to me? Chapter 184. Looking at her brother, looking down and pondering, Nangongzhi also felt a little strange for a while. Originally, she thought that after she revealed the things that both of them had been avoiding without any concealment, the relationship between the two of them would definitely change. Even if she didn't say ruthless words like cutting off all ties with him, there would always be something in her heart. But her brother didn't feel anything strange at all, and now he even began to think about deeper things about this scroll. Should Nangongzhi say that he is indeed worthy of being her brother? No matter what Bishui's plan is, at least Bishui told us the truth. Ro, what do you think we should do? Nangongzhi seemed to have thought about it clearly, and intended to put aside the matter of Bishui's secret for the time being. How to deal with the current situation is the most important thing, isn't it? Brother, although the Blood Robe Pavilion is not famous in the ninja world, it is undeniable that the Blood Robe Pavilion is indeed a powerful force. The 5 altar lords of the Blood Robe Pavilion, no matter where in the ninja world, they can easily become a powerful existence. The ninja world has never been a peaceful place. Since there is such a large force in our hands, we naturally can't let it go easily. After taking the action record from Nangongzhi's hand, Nangongzhi shook the scroll and threw it into the air, and with a wave of her small hand, although weaker than Nangongzhi's internal force, It was still very majestic, gushing out from Nangong Ro's hand. In the blink of an eye, the scroll was torn into pieces and drifted in the air. Some things, since we know, should be buried in the bottom of our hearts, and slowly weigh the pros and cons. The dead are gone, and we do have the obligation to avenge them, but we also have the premise of ensuring our own lives. Looking at Nangong Ro's inner strength, Nangongzhi was momentarily stunned. When they were young, Nangong Ro had told him that she didn't have the potential to cultivate internal energy. That was why when Nangongzhi joined Woodleaf, he sent Nangong Ro to Kiba Ninja School. He never thought that his sister would have such strong internal energy. Not to mention how much strength Nangong Ro could exert in a real battle, just her vigorous internal force was enough to wrestle with a jonin among the ninjas. Your inner strength. Although Nangongzhi didn't want to ask his sister how she cultivated her internal energy, he couldn't help but ask. One must know that internal energy and chakra were not compatible. Internal energy was cultivated by tapping into one's potential and absorbing the energy in the air. Chakra was cultivated by refining the spiritual energy in one's body and the body's potential. Although there was a slight connection, it was impossible to cultivate them at the same time. If his sister really cultivated internal energy and chakra, then it was no different from planting a bomb in his body that could explode at any time. Brother, I've never cultivated chakra before. Nangong Ro's mouth had a sly smile, like a child who quietly stole a candy, with a bit of innocence and cuteness. Then what's with your medical ninjutsu? Even strong people like 3 Generations and Tsunade Haim didn't notice anything strange? Nangongzhi was really puzzled because internal energy and chakra were very easy to distinguish. When he just entered the Woodleaf and fought with Kakashi, he was already discovered by 3 Generations. His sister was able to hide her internal energy from people like 3 Generations and Tsunade Haim, and even use Chakra's medical ninjutsu. It was like a fantasy story. They didn't notice it, but how did you notice it? Nangong Ro stood on her tiptoes, stretched out a finger and poked Nangongzhi's forehead, as if she felt that her brother's brain was really not that bright. Nangongzhi just remembered that he didn't notice it at all. Compared to Tsunade Haim and 3 Generations, he was the one who spent most of his time with his sister. My physique is quite special. Even if I practice internal energy, as long as I want to, I can hide it in my body. Even if I use internal energy, it won't send out a trace of internal energy fluctuations to the outside world. As for medical ninjutsu, although internal energy and chakra are indeed different, in fact, almost all medical ninjutsu use chakra as an auxiliary means to stimulate the body. Moreover, compared to chakra, which is a relatively violent energy, internal energy is more gentle because it is mixed with the free energy of heaven and earth. Practicing medical ninjutsu is more convenient. Nangong Ro looked at her brother with a smile on her face. If you say so, it's really like that. Nangongzhi scratched his head a little awkwardly. He almost only practiced internal energy and swordsmanship. After knowing that he couldn't practice chakra, Nangongzhi didn't put much thought into chakra and ninjutsu. Naturally, there was no way for him to know these things. Okay, let's stop talking about internal energy. Let's talk about business. Nangong Ro didn't seem to want to talk too much about her own cultivation. She pulled Nangongzhi back to the topic of how to deal with the Blood Cloak Pavilion. Nangongzhi shook his head. Since his sister didn't want to be entangled with him too much on this topic, Nangongzhi would follow his sister's wishes. After the two of them openly revealed the truth that they had hidden together, whether it was Nangongzhi or Nangong Ro, both of them felt that a big stone had been lifted from their hearts. At this moment, the two of them were very relaxed, and even their thoughts became very smooth. Since we have to control the Blood Cloak Pavilion and get rid of our enemies at the same time, we must not be too hasty. Otherwise, not only will we lose the Blood Cloak Pavilion, but there will also be a lot of unnecessary disputes. Nangongzhi thought carefully and then said, in fact, we don't need to treat the entire Blood Cloak Pavilion as our enemy. Although I only stayed in the Blood Cloak Pavilion for a short period of time, the 5 Altar Masters are not really that united. Since there are people who want to seize the Heaven's Calamity Sword, There will naturally be people who are more loyal to me, the master of the Heaven's Calamity Sword. What we need to do is actually very simple. Draw in the forces that can be drawn in and separate the forces of our enemies. As long as we have enough strength, we will even have a righteous name. Everything will be easy. Taking in the Blood Cloak Pavilion and getting rid of our enemies might be complementary things. Chapter 185. Brother Nangong, Sister Roa. Sister Mishiro has already finished cooking. If you don't go now, little Linger will finish it all. Just as Nangongja and Nangong Ro were about to continue discussing the various matters regarding the blood clothing pavilion, little Linger's small head poked out from the crack in the door. Her expression was somewhat unbearable, as if she really wanted to eat. Seeing little Linger's delicate appearance, Nangongja and Nangong Ro looked at each other and smiled. The two of them were scheming back and forth, but this little Linger became like this because of a meal. It was truly laughable. Nangongja walked to little Linger's side, stretched out his hand, and gently pulled little Linger's chubby face, and said to little Linger with a bit of banter, "Then we'll be in trouble. Once little gluttonous kitten opens her mouth, there will be nothing left for us to eat." Then Nangongja looked back at Nangong Ro and said with a smile, "Let's go eat?" Seeing that little Linger is starving, we can slowly think of a countermeasure. If little Linger is starving, then we'll really be sinful. Nangong Ro also smiled, nodded, and walked to Nangongja's side. Brother Nangong is bad. He said little Linger is a little gluttonous kitten. You two were clearly in the room, so why did you keep chatting like this? Sister Mishiro insisted on waiting for the two of you to arrive before we can eat. Little Linger was already starving, so she came to call you. Little Linger pouted her little mouth, as if she was very dissatisfied with Nangongja calling her a little greedy cat. She complained about Nangong and his sister. It's Brother Nangong's fault. Brother Nangong shouldn't have called little Linger a little greedy cat. It's Brother Nangong's fault. Nangongja squatted down so that he could look into little Linger's eyes. Then, he admitted defeat to little Linger. That's how it is. How can little Linger be a greedy little kitten? Before little Linger could finish her words, Nangongja had already walked past little Linger and out of the door, leaving only his voice echoing in the air. Isn't that so? Little Linger has never been a greedy little kitten. She's clearly a big greedy kitten. Brother Nangong, stop right there. After hearing Nangongja's words, little Linger ran towards Nangongja with her pair of short legs. She bared her fangs and brandished her claws, obviously wanting to make her brother Nangong suffer and force him to change his words. Brother, you're already an adult, but you're still acting like a child. Looking at little Linger playing with Nangongja and little Linger who was choked by Nangongja, Nangong Ro laughed very happily. There was not a trace of the calm and serious appearance that she had when she was explaining the truth and discussing strategies with Nangongja. A smile bloomed on her face, as if warm sunlight suddenly fell on a snowy mountain that never melted all year round, and the ice and snow silently melted just like that. Her brother was still her brother after all. Time passed quickly, and Nangongja had already been in the Lion Tribe's alternate dimension for nearly a month. Nangongja estimated that many of the middle-level and high-level cadres of the Blood Cloak Pavilion should have already arrived, so he left the Lion Tribe's alternate dimension under the gazes of the three girls. This time, when everything was settled, Nangongja would definitely bring his sister, Mishiro, and little Linger out of the Lion Tribe's alternate dimension. Nangongja did not have the heart to let them stay in the Lion Tribe's alternate dimension without any trace of human habitation. Looking at the symbol of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, the senior banishment's blood cloak, Nangongja picked it up and held it in his arm. He then pushed open the door of the chief's office and walked out. After taking a few steps, Nangongja had already met Elder Qing Mu, the altar master of the Greenwood altar, who was in charge of logistics. Chief. When he saw Nangongja, Qing Mu solemnly bowed to Nangongja. Altar master Qing Mu, there's no need to be so formal. After all, I haven't officially completed the ceremony to succeed the chief of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, so it's better not to be so formal. Nangongzhi looked at Qing Mu and smiled very gently. It's just a ceremony. Chief, it's only a matter of time before you become the leader of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. Since that's the case, there's no need to be so formal. Qing Mu didn't listen to Nangongzhi's words. He was still very strict with his etiquette. Nangongzhi did not want to be too entangled with Qing Mu on such trivial matters. Since Qing Mu insisted on bowing, Nangongzhi did not need to stop him. How's the preparation for the ceremony going? Nangongzhi asked the question he was most concerned about. The preparation work is basically completed. All the middle-level and high-level cadres have also gathered. If there are no accidents, the ceremony will be held tomorrow. Qing Mu naturally did not need to hide such a serious matter, so he truthfully reported to Nangongzhi. Thank you for your hard work, Altar Master Qing Mu. The ceremony is very important. Please take care of it, Altar Master Qing Mu. Nangongzhi bowed slightly to Qing Mu. There's no need for that, Chief. This is what I should do. Qing Mu slightly pushed aside, and a disciple in Qing Mu's uniform came to his side. He whispered a few words in Qing Mu's ear and turned to leave. Chief, I still have many trivial matters to attend to. If you don't mind, could you? Of course. I just saw Altar Master Qing Mu and went to disturb you for a moment. Since you have important matters to attend to, I'll naturally prioritize them. Nangongzhi said with a smile. Thank you for your understanding, Chief. I'll take my leave now. Go ahead, Altar Master Qing Mu. The conversation between the two ended. Qing Mu also turned and left, leaving Nangongzhi standing in the same place. His eyes were empty, and there were many thoughts running through his mind. Among the 5 elements Altar Masters, Altar Master Qing Mu was the oldest. He wondered what his position was in the various matters. Although the conversation earlier was very casual, Nangongzhi still felt that even old man Qing Mu, who was the closest to him, was not willing to become someone else's subordinate. There was still a long way to go before he could subdue the Blood Garment Pavilion. Moreover, one of the Altar Masters had a grudge against Nangongzhi. As expected of the Blood Garment Pavilion Altar Masters who stood out among countless people. None of the 5 Blood Garment Pavilion Altar Masters were easy to deal with. Is Qi Yan really my enemy? Did Bai Shui really just give me a piece of information? Nangongzhi still needed to investigate everything. When he thought of this, Nangongzhi instantly felt a headache coming on. Chapter 186. Time always passed very quickly, not to mention that it was only a day. When Nangongzhi woke up from his bed, the morning sun was already shining through the window. After washing up and putting on his clothes, Nangongzhi opened the door to his room. The headquarters of the Blood Garment Pavilion was located on top of a mountain. Coupled with the fact that it was surrounded by woods, the weather was even colder. A few wisps of white mist lingered in the tall attic that had not been dispersed by the sun, making everything look peaceful and comfortable. On the contrary, many of the disciples of the Greenwood altar of the Blood Garment Pavilion were extremely busy. Some were busy sweeping the floor, some were carrying food to some unknown place, and of course, most of them were hanging decorations everywhere. Whether it was the hedge or the lawn, they all looked like they had been meticulously built. Your Excellency, Nangongzhi was lost in thought as he watched the busy disciples. Suddenly, a person bent over to Nangongzhi's side and called out to Nangongzhi. When Nangongzhi turned around, he saw a familiar face. It's you. The person who called out to Nangongzhi was the waiter who had been with old man Qing Mu in the tavern. Altar leader Qing Mu asked me to guard your room. If you wake up, I'll come to your side and be your guide. Thank you, Altar leader Qing Mu. There are still many roads in the Blood Garment Pavilion that I don't know. If you can be my guide, it'll naturally save me a lot of trouble. Nangongzhi smiled. Obviously, he felt that it was not bad to have such an acquaintance guide him. In that case, please follow me. Don't forget to bring the symbol of the Blood Garment Pavilion, the blood garment. We'll have to use this dress for the succession ceremony later. The waiter looked around Nangongzhi and realized that Nangongzhi did not bring the blood garment, so he reminded him. Thank you for reminding me. I really didn't bring my bloody clothes with me. Nangongzhi patted his head as if he had forgotten about this matter. He quickly ran to his room and picked up the neatly folded bloody clothes. At this time, the servant also handed over a small box with exquisite workmanship. The blood robe is the symbol of our blood robe pavilion after all. It's really inappropriate for it to be in our hands. If you don't mind, why don't you put the bloody clothes on the box in my hand for now? The manservant's words were actually somewhat reasonable. The blood garment was the symbol of the blood garment pavilion. It would not be good for the blood garment pavilion to hold it in their hands. There's no need for the box. Nangongzhi looked into the servant's eyes and said with a smile. This blood-red robe is a remnant of senior banishment. Since it has chosen me, there is no need for it to return to the box. Although the servant was slightly surprised by Nangongzhi's words, he did not say much. His eyes were very calm as he put away the wooden box in his hand. Without waiting for the servant to continue speaking, Nangongzhi turned over the bloody clothes in his hand and directly put it on his body. Let's go. Looking at the servant, Nangongzhi suddenly said such a sentence, then without paying attention to the servant's reaction, he took the lead and walked away. Oh, isn't that the bloody clothes enshrined in the main hall? Is this the new head of our blood garment pavilion? He looks so young. Don't talk nonsense. Don't look at his young age. He is very famous in the ninja world. Some people call him Yama. How much strength can such a kid have? I don't know if he used the Heaven's Disaster Sword in his hand to force several altar lords to sit on the throne. Silence. This person is not to be trifled with. I heard that the reason why he was able to become the head is that he passed the Dragon Transformation Road by himself. Dragon Transformation Road. That's the Dragon Transformation Road. That's really amazing. I didn't expect that someone could pass such a difficult trial. Along the way, many disciples of the Blood Garment Pavilion saw Nangongzhi. The Heaven's Disaster Sword in his hand and the bloody clothes on his body were really difficult to not recognize. Although they have deliberately lowered their voices with Nangongzhi's keen five senses, it was not difficult to hear what they were saying. Your Excellency, please forgive us. These disciples stay in the mountains all year round and don't have much experience. Please don't be angry with them because of these things. Before Nangongzhi said anything, the servant next to Aoki defended these disciples of the Blood Garment Pavilion. Waving his hand, Nangongzhi felt that there was nothing to be angry about. It doesn't matter. People are curious. The Blood Garment Pavilion has been in seclusion for a long time. When they see a strange face like me, they will naturally have some feelings in their hearts. As long as the time is right, these things will naturally be solved. Nangongzhi looked at the servant. At this moment, he did not have the so-called sharpness of a swordsman at all. Instead, he was as gentle as jade and had the demeanor of a gentleman. Then I'll thank you on behalf of these disciples. The servant bowed slightly and then continued to lead Nangongzhi forward. Nangongzhi looked at the direction they were heading. It was the symbolic building of the Blood Garment Pavilion, where he had passed the Dragon Transformation Road and obtained the bloody clothes, the Blood Garment Pavilion. So, we're going to hold the succession ceremony here? Nangongzhi pointed at the many beautiful flags with the Blood Garment Pavilion's logo hanging on the window frame and a huge round platform in front of the Blood Garment Pavilion that did not originally exist. Yes, the 5 altar masters are already here. Your Excellency, you can go and find them. I'll take my leave for now. After the servant bowed to Nangongzhi, he turned around and left. However, for some reason, Nangongzhi looked at the huge platform in front of the Blood Garment Pavilion and felt a little uneasy and nervous. How many years had it been since Nangongzhi felt this way? Today's schedule was quite tight, so Nangongzhi did not have the time to think so much. Therefore, he lifted his foot and walked into the Blood Garment Pavilion's attic. The 5 altar masters were sitting together and seemed to be discussing something. After Nangongzhi walked over, the 5 altar masters naturally noticed Nangongzhi's arrival. They all stood up and bowed to Nangongzhi. What are you guys discussing? Nangongzhi was slightly curious. We're actually discussing the speech you should give when you succeed as the head. We already have a draft. If your excellency thinks it's suitable, we can pass this speech. As he spoke, Ho Tu handed a stack of papers to Nangongzhi. Chapter 187. Nangongzhi looked at the thick script and didn't say anything. He just slowly flipped through it. The altar masters didn't say anything. They were waiting for Nangongzhi to finish reading the draft and see if he had any comments. It didn't take long for Nangongzhi to finish reading the script in his hand, but his expression was indescribably strange. Although the script wasn't bad, it was long-winded, and there were many meaningless words that were repeatedly piled up. Nangongzhi really didn't know what to say. This script. Nangongzhi handed the thick script in his hand back to Ho Tu. Although there's no problem, it's a bit too cumbersome. Nangongzhi said, but he also remembered the time when he was still in Konoha. Every time he gave a speech to Hokage-sama, and then he thought about the state he was in every time he listened to Hokage-sama's speech. He couldn't help but feel conflicted about this tedious speech. You see, I'm just saying that a long-winded script is definitely unbearable for the head seat. You all just don't listen, you all insist that this is the only way to highlight the prestige of the head seat. Hearing Nangongzhi's words, Akame immediately came out and said anxiously. Looking at Akame's rough appearance, Nangongzhi really couldn't connect such a person with the image of hiring ninjas to kill a village and snatch the Heaven's Calamity Sword. Is there something else hidden, or is this a careful disguise? Nangongzhi couldn't tell at the moment. Maybe more time is needed to test it. I wonder what the head seat thinks? Ho Tu, who has always been steady, also asked. This succession ceremony is actually equivalent to letting the members of the Blood Cloth Pavilion know me as the new head seat, so there's no practical significance in saying so many flowery words. I also have some scripts in my mind. If you don't mind, I'll go on stage myself. Nangongzhi said his opinion one by one. Head seat. Although the succession ceremony is an internal event, it is also extremely important. It's not that I don't believe you, but there should be no loopholes in the speech. Aoki suddenly said. Of course, I will definitely not let you down. The Bloodcloth Pavilion is not only your Bloodcloth Pavilion, but also mine, Nangongzhi's Bloodcloth Pavilion. Hearing Nangongzhi say this, the altar masters had nothing to say. They all saluted Nangongzhi, then went out one by one to supervise the layout of the venue. Only Nangongzhi remained, watching the Blood Garment Pavilion's disciples busying themselves with the ceremony. No one knew what he was thinking. Not long after that, it was already late. The Blood's Pavilion's SSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSSS took their seats, and the 5 altar masters of the 5 elements altar were already standing on the round platform that Nangongzhi had been looking at for a long time. The oldest, Aoki, took a step forward, then gathered his internal strength and spoke. "Thank you for putting down your many things and coming to the headquarters of the Bloodcloth Pavilion." Aoki's slightly old voice became extremely loud under the influence of his internal strength. Even Nangongzhi, who was inside the attic, could hear it clearly. "My Bloodcloth Pavilion has always existed as a hidden force in the ninja world. We have never fought for hegemony or bullied the weak. We are just like the beginning, an organization established by a group of internal strength cultivators for self-protection. All our actions are carried out for self-protection. This has always been our purpose. However, the Bloodcloth Pavilion has always been incomplete. After the death of Banishment Senpai, the head of the Bloodcloth Pavilion has been vacant. Banishment Senpai left the 9-dragon painting wall for us, and the path of dragonization is the only test to succeed the head of the Bloodcloth Pavilion. However, none of us unfilial descendants were able to successfully pass through these checkpoints. It really makes one sigh endlessly. However, today is different from the past. In the past, our Bloodcloak Pavilion could live in the isolated world of shinobi and protect ourselves from the flames of war. But now, the ninja world is becoming more and more confusing, and some of the information from Aquamarine Altar is enough to prove that there is an undercurrent in the ninja world. Until 1 month ago, a person came to our Bloodcloth Pavilion with the sword of Banishment Senpai. It was he who passed the path of dragonization with his own strength and got the recognition of the blood cloth left by Banishment Senpai. So the 5 of us have gathered all of you here to meet the new head of the blood cloth pavilion. After Aoki finished his last sentence, he had already led the 5 altar lords to stand together in 2 rows, and the empty road in the middle was directly facing the door of the blood cloth pavilion. The door, which was still closed, slowly opened at this moment with a somewhat muffled, squeak sound. A person was standing inside the door. The figure was slightly thin and wore a blood-red brocade robe. His black hair was soft and low, almost touching his shoulders. He was holding a very simple-looking black sword in his arms. But these couldn't compare to the eyes of the person. A pair of starry eyes and sharp eyebrows seemed to have endless wisdom and calmness. This person was Xianxia, who was known as Yama, and was about to become the head of the blood cloth pavilion. There was no applause, no cheers, just the sight of Xianxia. Silence, but also with an inexplicable power. Stomp, Xianxia took a step forward, and the sound of his feet hitting the ground was so clear as though it was ringing in everyone's ears. Without stopping, Xianxia's footsteps did not stop. As the sound of his feet hitting the ground resounded, Xianxia began to release waves of pressure from his body. In the beginning, the pressure was very weak, just like an ordinary young man who had just cultivated for a few years. However, this pressure wasn't constant. Instead, it was constantly increasing in strength. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. Xianxia was getting closer to the huge round platform, and the pressure on his body was getting stronger. Gradually, some of the ordinary disciples from the Greenwood altar could not hold on anymore. Their knees kept shaking as though they would immediately kneel on the ground if there was a little external force. Subsequently, it was not just the ordinary disciples from the Greenwood altar, but the middle-level cadres of the blood cloth pavilion who were weaker below the platform also became like the ordinary disciples. Chapter 188. Step by step, step by step, step by step, Xianxia walked onto the huge platform. Other than the 5 altar lords, everyone else seemed to be suppressed by Xianxia's power to the point that they could not breathe. The Blood Garment Pavilion was located deep in the mountains, so it was naturally unavoidable for them to hear the chirping of birds and cicadas. However, at this moment, the birds stopped singing, and the insects also stopped making noise. Everyone could clearly hear the sound of their own breathing, their own heartbeat, and the sound of their blood rushing through their veins. Everyone's gaze was focused on this person. It was as if everything was revolving around this person. I am Xianxia. Xianxia's voice rang out, as if he was whispering in everyone's ears. He did not use much strength, but everyone could clearly hear Xianxia's voice. Some of you in the Blood Garment Pavilion may have heard of me, and many of you may not have heard of me. So, I will introduce myself to everyone here. I am Xianxia. Different people have different names for me. My opponents call me Yama, and my friends call me Hero. However, I know that these are not me. I am only myself, the me who holds a sword and fights to the death with others. However, when I made up my mind to come here and break through the path of dragonization with the sword, I knew that I had obtained another identity. I will be the head of the Blood Garment Pavilion. This identity not only makes me your immediate superior, but it also puts a heavy burden on my shoulders. I have also asked myself, can I really bear such a heavy burden? Managing and leading an organization is not a one-on-one fight. There are many problems that I have never faced before. I have to be responsible for the lives of everyone who is willing to join the Blood Garment Pavilion. In my previous life, this was unimaginable. I am naturally lazy, but for various reasons, I had to come here. In accordance with the wishes of Senior Banishment, you will be responsible for every life with this heavenly tribulation sword. As Xianxia spoke, the audience below the stage gradually became enthralled. Unlike countless people who had lofty aspirations, Xianxia was currently chatting with an ordinary person. She expressed her worries and confusion. Although it wasn't as imposing, it was very sincere. Almost everyone who could become a leader was a smart person. When interacting with others, it was inevitable that one would carefully ponder over the meaning of the other party's words. At this moment, Nangongzhi said everything so straightforwardly. Indeed, it was easy for others to hear his thoughts. However, I gradually understood why I repeatedly went against my own will and came here to challenge this dragonization path. Because I need you, just like how you need me. I have experienced the Shinobi World War, and I have seen countless people displaced in the war. They are very similar to the ancestors of the blood-robed pavilion who were oppressed and exploited. Everyone present, I believe that you all think that you have enough strength to protect yourself in the Shinobi world. But is this really the case? I believe that you have already felt the pressure I have imposed on you. This is not to show off. It is to tell you that there is always someone stronger. When you think that your strength is enough, you should know that there are many forces that are beyond your control in this world. Although the blood-robed pavilion is a hidden force, it has never been a hidden force. Countless disciples of the blood-robed pavilion are distributed in many places in the Shinobi world. I believe that you all actually understand that the Shinobi world has become a pool of undercurrents. Unlike the Shinobi World War that started just between ninjas, this disaster has almost enveloped everyone who lives on this land. Including you and me. I am the successor of senior banishment, and my relationship with the blood-robed pavilion is extremely deep. I don't wish to use my own strength to threaten all of you and make all of you submit to my rule. In the Shinobi world, there are not many cultivators who practice internal strength. Every person who cultivates internal energy is like a brother or sister to me. This position is not the basis for me to rule you all. It is the guarantee that I can protect everything I want to protect with everyone. Nangongzhi's words were very straightforward. Everyone below the stage was also listening carefully. Most of the people in the blood-robed pavilion were the orphans of the first batch of internal strength cultivators who were rescued by the banishment. The story of their ancestors was so clear in their minds. Anyone with a normal brain would not like the war that swallowed people's lives. However, Nangongzhi's words meant that the war was about to come to everyone. At this point, Nangongzhi suddenly withdrew all of the pressure that he had released. Many disciples with lower cultivation levels directly sat on the ground as their knees went soft. I'm not good at talking. Originally, the 5 altar masters prepared a very thick speech for me. There are many valuable words in it. Many words that can prove my authority. However, I don't want to treat you like this. That's all I have to say. If you think that I can protect your lives by being the head of the blood-robed pavilion, then I will be. If you think that the blood-robed pavilion does not need someone like me, please be honest. Please tell me frankly, I won't stay any longer. After that, Nangongzhi turned around and left. Only the 5 altar masters, who still looked stupid on the stage, and many middle-level and high-level cadres of the blood-robed pavilion were left behind. There were gradually some voices of discussion in the audience. After all, Nangongzhi's actions were indeed a little too different from ordinary people. I'll go and see our head. I'll have to trouble you to comfort the people in the audience. Clearwater said to the 4 altar masters. Most of the people in the audience were disciples from the green wood altar. The rest were disciples from the red flame altar, the sharp metal altar, and the thick earth altar. The people from the Clearwater altar were engaged in some undercover and intelligence missions, so they could not leave at all. Therefore, not many people came. It was indeed the best choice to let the other 4 altar masters comfort the disciples while he went to look for the honest and somewhat willful head. Old man Qing Mu and the other 3 nodded as well. This new head seat originally looked quite steady. Why did he turn a proper succession ceremony into such a mess? It was really puzzling. Chapter 189. Knock knock. There was a light knock on the door of the blood clothing pavilion's head office where Nangongzhi was. Bai Shui stood in front of the door, waiting for Nangongzhi's response. Please come in. Nangongzhi's lazy voice came from the office. Bai Shui's lips curled into a smile as she opened the door and looked at Nangongzhi. The blood robe that represented the blood robe pavilion had been casually placed by Nangong's side, as if he didn't care. "You've really created quite a bit of trouble for us, our new Lord Head." Bai Shui's words were somewhat reproachful, as if she was criticizing Nangong's actions. However, there was still an indescribable smile in her eyes, as if she was very appreciative of Nangong's actions. "Is it very troublesome? If you can't even solve such a small matter, then how did you all become altar masters who are second only to one person and above thousands?" Nangongja looked at Bai Shui and said with a hint of ridicule, "Of course we can solve such a small problem, but it's really annoying to have such trouble appear out of nowhere." Bai Shui took a few steps forward so that she could lean on Nangongja's desk. Her beautiful figure was displayed in front of Nangongja. Unlike Mashiro and Nangong Ro, who were still young and tender, Bai Shui was simply like the most delicate flower, displaying her beauty. Bai Shui's face was almost pressed against Nangong's face, her hot breath from her nose and mouth hitting Nangong's face. The head speech just now was indeed a good speech in a certain sense. It's simply like a challenge letter with the fiercest words. It's just short of pointing at our noses and cursing the disciples of the Blood Garment Pavilion as trash. Unable to ensure your own safety, we are waiting for a lazy person like you to come and save us from the fire and water. You are really arrogant, our Lord Head." Nangongja moved his head back, as if he didn't want to maintain such a position that could easily be misunderstood by others. He said indifferently, "I don't think it's nonsense. I don't think I'm spouting nonsense. The relationship between me and the Blood Garment Pavilion is one of mutual benefit. Indeed, these are all facts. But if you make it so clear, how awkward will it be?" Bai Shui reached out her hand and flicked Nangongja's head, as if she was teaching her disobedient little brother. Nangongja didn't know how long it had been since he was treated like this, but after being flicked on the head by Bai Shui, Nangongja didn't feel any resistance. Instead, he felt that Bai Shui's actions were natural. It was really strange. Okay, I won't waste time here with the head. Anyway, with the head's temper, I think he won't listen to my nagging. I'd better go back and appease those disciples who were ridiculed by the head's seat together with those fools." Bai Shui said, no longer leaning on Nangong's desk. She waved her hand without looking back and walked out of Nangong's office. "Bai Shui, for you." Nangongja seemed to be asking Bai Shui, but also seemed to be asking himself. Bai Shui gave Nangongja a very strange feeling. "How is our Lord Head?" Aoki asked when he saw Bai Shui coming over. "Alas." Bai Shui sighed as if she was very disappointed. He didn't regret it at all. Was our decision to let him go on the dragonization path wrong? Aoki seemed to regret letting Nangongja challenge the dragonization path and giving Nangongja the opportunity to become the head of the Blood Cloth Pavilion. In fact, there is nothing wrong with what he said. We do need his help to really set foot in the ninja world. His reputation, his strength is what we need. Although his actions today were reckless, it isn't bad news for us. The Blood Cloth Pavilion has been under the management of the 5 altar lords. Even in the early days of its establishment, the banishment elders didn't want to reach their hands into the power of the Blood Cloth Pavilion. Since Nangongja has disappointed us so much, then we will treat him as a clay statue. We will just treat him well. Bai Shui didn't seem to mind that Nangongja didn't know how to manage the Blood Cloth Pavilion. On the contrary, she was somewhat glad that Nangongja didn't know how to manage the Blood Cloth Pavilion. Bai Shui is right. That boy named Nangongja doesn't seem so reliable. Since he is willing to lose such an opportunity to win over so many disciples of the Blood Garment Pavilion, then we don't mind making him a mere figurehead. Let him stay here obediently. Akame was the first to jump out and agree with Bai Shui's point of view. She looked at Bai Shui with a pair of eyes full of a kind of flattery. That's the only way. Since he is so useless, he can't blame us for treating him like this. Aoki shook his head, as if he was very disappointed. He no longer discussed with the other altar lords and turned to appease the disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion. Seeing Aoki leave, whether it was Rue Jin or Ho Tu, in fact, tacitly agreed to Nangongja's attitude, so the remaining 4 altar lords also left. At this moment, no one knew what the 5 altar lords were thinking in their hearts. However, the decision to make Nangongzhi a figurehead was definitely going to be fulfilled. Nangongzhi's office was at the top of the symbolic tall building of the Bloodcloth Pavilion. Through the window, not only could one see the grief and indignation of the ordinary disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion, but one could also see the scene when the 5 altar lords had gathered together to discuss their attitude towards Nangongzhi. This opening is really just right. The Bloodcloth Pavilion is indeed very important to me, but I have an almost perfect escape route in the Lion Clan's alternate space. As long as I am willing, no matter what, I can guarantee the safety of Mishiro and the others. To me, the Bloodcloth Pavilion is just a chess piece. I hope the plan that Ruru and I have discussed for so long can be implemented smoothly. When the time comes, whether it is the Bloodcloth Pavilion or my enemy, they will all obediently fall into my hands. The so-called declaration of war and the attitude of the 5 altar lords towards Nangongzhi in the future were actually all under Nangongzhi's control. If you want to take, you must first give. Instead of pointlessly clashing head-on with the 5 altar masters who held great power in their hands, he might as well play dumb and wait for the right time to take everything into his hands. Chapter 190. Pa! A crisp sound came from the window of Nangongzhi's room. At the same time, there was the sound of glass shattering. Nangongzhi! What right do you have to succeed the position of the head of the Blood Garment Pavilion? You were just lucky enough to pass the path of dragon transformation. To have the opportunity to become the head of the Blood Garment Pavilion is already a blessing that you have cultivated for many lifetimes. You actually dared to belittle the Blood Garment Pavilion in public, as if you are very unwilling to become our head. Why don't you come out and face your death? A voice came from the broken window. The voice was filled with grief and anger, as if the thing that he cherished the most had been belittled and insulted. This was the norm for the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion. Almost all of the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion were the earliest disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion. Their lives began in the Bloodcloth Pavilion. They grew up in the Bloodcloth Pavilion, became strong in the Bloodcloth Pavilion, and cultivated their own temperament and pride in the Bloodcloth Pavilion. Nangongzhi's ridiculing speech was like Elvi, Max. He slammed the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion to the ground and even stepped on them a few times. Nangongzhi even felt that this group of people had come a little late. It seemed that the appeasement of the 5 altar masters had a little effect. Looking at the angry disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion standing at the entrance of the courtyard where he lived, and a few of them seemed to have responded to his call to follow behind the disciple, Nangongzhi could not help but feel a little funny. Although these people were about the same age as him, and might even be a little older, they did not seem to have much experience in dealing with people. She didn't know who instigated it, but she stupidly became a target that pushed her and ruined her reputation. Nangongzhi raised his Heaven's Disaster Sword and put the Bloodcloth Pavilion on his shoulders. Then he jumped out of the broken window. Originally, when the disciples of the Bloodcloak Pavilion smashed the windows of Nangongzhi's residence, they were secretly delighted that their prank had succeeded. They were also relieved that Nangongzhi had not come out to look for them. After all, the pressure that Nangongzhi released during the enthronement ceremony was something that everyone could feel. How could such a person be defeated by his disciples? Therefore, when Nangongzhi jumped out of the broken window and stood in front of them, Nangongzhi was stunned. The few of them couldn't help but follow the instinctive actions of their bodies and take a step back. Nangongzhi noticed their actions. Nangongzhi couldn't help but sneer at them. He placed the Heavenly Calamity Sword on the ground and placed his arms on the hilt. His eyes looked down at the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion with a hint of mockery and coldness in his eyes. "Weren't you very fierce just now? She smashed my window, and she's still making a ruckus downstairs. Why did you take a few steps back when you saw me?" When the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion heard Nangongzhi's mocking voice, they couldn't help but blush. Under the gaze of the others, the disciple who took the lead could only try to overcome his fear. He took a few steps forward and stood in front of Nangongzhi. Did I say anything wrong? Although our blood cloth pavilion's reputation is not well known, since you're here, you should know how powerful the blood cloth pavilion is. This is the place where I was born and raised. Every word you said was an insult to the blood cloth pavilion. Although I know I can't beat you, even if I have to risk my life, I will make you apologize for insulting the blood cloth pavilion. The words stuttered out of the blood cloth pavilion disciple's mouth. If it was just based on what he said, perhaps many people would give him a thumbs up and praise him by saying, "What a little hero who doesn't fear power." However, when they looked at the little hero's trembling legs and fluttering eyes, were these words really what the blood cloth pavilion disciple wanted to say? If so, it would really be a disgrace to the little hero's name. Boy, wanting to show off is a bad habit of every young person. This is nothing. Who hasn't been young and frivolous? However, to be used by others like a fool, are you really prepared to anger the strong? Nangongzhi's face no longer had the mocking expression from before. Instead, there was a trace of seriousness. Such a serious attitude made the disciples of the blood cloth pavilion who came to provoke Nangongzhi even more flustered. Did they really do something wrong? Did they really overestimate their abilities? Was he really prepared to face the wrath of the emperor? These questions lingered in the minds of the blood cloth pavilion disciples. Suddenly, Nangongzhi released his murderous aura. The majestic aura reminded the teenagers of Nangongzhi's insufferably arrogant attitude when he walked out of the attic. It was like a god patrolling. Don't come over. The leading teenager actually sat down on the ground because of the pressure of the aura. Almost in an instant, his face was full of tears and snot. He kicked his legs that had become somewhat weak, only hoping that he could get farther away from Nangongzhi. Looking back at the blood cloth pavilion disciples who came with him, the teenager was even more afraid when he saw that they had already disappeared. Before coming, the teenager actually knew a lot about Nangongzhi. This person was a famous butcher in the ninja world. During the Ninja World War, because he killed a lot of people, he was called Yama. Could a small shrimp like him really save his life in the hands of Nangongzhi? He didn't know where he got the strength from, but he actually stood up and stumbled to run away. Nangongzhi didn't stop him. In fact, Nangongzhi deliberately let the teenager stand up by himself. His eyes glanced at a secret place near Nangongzhi's residence, and Nangongzhi's voice came. "If you have any difficulties in the future, just come to me directly." Such a small shrimp, although I don't care about his life or death, is really troublesome. Nangongzhi knew that although he didn't deliberately raise his voice, the people hiding in the dark must be able to hear him clearly. Although he said that it was troublesome, did Nangongzhi really feel that these things were troublesome, so he let the reckless teenager go? No one knew and no one cared. Chapter 191. Nangongzhi was sitting in his office, slowly reading a book that recorded some of the history of the blood cloth pavilion. However, his slightly squinted eyes and long breathing made people feel that he was actually taking a nap. This kind of leisurely time was not as long as Nangongzhi imagined, because the door of Nangongzhi's office was violently opened. Nangongzhi opened his eyes in annoyance and looked at the door lock that was still half hanging on the door. He could not help but light a candle for this devastated door lock in his heart. In front of Nangongzhi stood a very rough-looking man. It was Qi Yan, the altar master of the Scarlet Flame, altar of the Five Elements, altar of the Blood Cloth Pavilion. This group of little bastards actually dared to find trouble with you in the middle of the night. See if I don't teach them a lesson. We have to spank their asses so that they know what they should do and what they shouldn't do. Before Nangongzhi could speak, Qi Yan had already spoken first. It seemed that it was because of the group of Blood Cloth Pavilion disciples who smashed the windows of Nangongzhi's residence last night. Qi Yan, why are you so angry? Calm down, calm down. It's just a group of children fooling around. I didn't even take it to heart, so why are you acting like this? It's just a pity that the door lock of my house has been broken into such a state. Nangongzhi's words were neither salty nor light, which made Qi Yan a little embarrassed. He scratched his head, looking like a simple and honest person. I was so anxious that I actually broke the door of the head's room. I'll go find someone to fix it. You don't have to worry about it." After saying that, Qi Yan had already walked out of Nangongzhi's room. Only the somewhat broken door was left, as if it was still complaining about Qi Yan's atrocities. "Qi Yan, Nangongzhi laughed for no reason, not knowing if he was laughing at Qi Yan or someone else. After the young Bloody Garment Pavilion disciples smashed Nangongzhi's window last night, the 5 altar masters seemed to have strengthened their supervision of the disciples. No one dared to provoke Nangongzhi again. Just like that, the days passed peacefully. Nangongzhi also gradually participated in the management of the Blood Garment Pavilion. Although it was said that he was involved in the management, it was actually just Nangongzhi attending the regular meetings of the altar masters. To the altar masters, it was just another stool at the side of the table. Since the altar masters had already made up their minds to treat Nangongzhi like a clay statue, they had to act with an attitude that wouldn't affect anything. The meeting was mainly presided over by Old Man Aoki. Perhaps because of his old age, Old Man Aoki spoke like the 3 generations Hokage of Woodleaf. Not only Qi Yan, but even Nangongzhi was yawning again and again. The Akatsuki organization of the Rain Country has made a commission to our Blood Garment Pavilion. They hope to send a strong person to carry out a mission with them. Qi Yan, Ruijin, who are you going to send? Old Man Aoki said to Qi Yan and Ruijin. This mission was obviously a bit difficult. Ordinary Blood Garment Pavilion disciples couldn't carry it out, so Old Man Aoki brought it up at the altar master meeting. Akatsuki organization? Hearing this name, Nangongzhi couldn't help but be excited. A long time ago, Nangongzhi and Jiraiya went to Mount Mayaboku, one of the 3 holy lands, for various reasons. At that time, Li Yang and Toad Sage had a secret talk for a while. At that time, Li Yang didn't tell Nangongzhi the reason, but later, he revealed a little bit of information to Nangongzhi. That person called Jiraiya will receive a disciple who will save the shinobi world in the future. That is, the so-called Child of Prophecy. After Nangongzhi learned about this, he collected a lot of information about Jiraiya. Originally, the relationship between Nangongzhi and Shinakushina was not bad. When he was entrusted by the 3 generations to take care of Shinakushina and her son, Nangongzhi also got a lot of information about Jiraiya. One of them was that Jiraiya once received 3 disciples in the Rain Country, and these 3 disciples were the founders of the Akatsuki organization. He heard that one of them was killed by the demigod Hanzo the Salamander. Now it seems that 2 former disciples named Nagato and Konan are leading the Akatsuki organization. What's more, Itachi Uchiha, his ally, joined the organization after leaving the Woodleaf. This really piqued one's interest. "Oh, have you heard of this organization?" Aoki saw that Nangongzhi actually blurted out the name of the Akatsuki organization and couldn't help but ask. "Indeed, this Akatsuki organization does have a little bit of relationship with me. If you don't mind, let me take care of this Akatsuki organization's commission, right?" Nangongzhi stood up and said to the other 5 altar lords. Originally, several altar lords have their own affairs. Such a commission must be carried out by an altar lord, and it won't be mentioned in the altar lords meeting. Since Nangongzhi wants to solve this problem, isn't it just right? No objection. Since the seat lord wants to go, then naturally we will give it to the seat lord. Akame was the first to express her opinion, as if she was worried that Nangongzhi would go back on his words. Since the seat lord wants to go, then naturally there is no problem. With the seat lord's strength, dealing with such a small task is naturally easy. Bishui also nodded and said to Nangongzhi in agreement. Although Ruijin and Ho-Tu didn't speak, they also nodded their heads and agreed with Nangongzhi's proposal. Letting Nangongzhi go out for a period of time was naturally good for the altar lords. Although they always wanted to treat Nangongzhi like a clay sculpture, if Nangongzhi's brain cramped and slightly complained about the Blood Cloth Pavilion's disciples, then it really wouldn't be a good thing. If Nangongzhi could stay away from the Blood Cloth Pavilion, then it would be even better. In that case, I will trouble the seat lord with this matter. After this meeting, I will have Bai Shuai send the detailed information to Sir Head Seat. Aoki saw that several people didn't have any objection, so he made a conclusion. Then they began to talk about other things, but at this moment, Nangong's mind had drifted to the Rain Country. Akatsuki Organization. Although it was inconvenient to communicate with him, Nangong still had some information about this organization. It was really interesting. Chapter 192. A gust of wind blew, bringing up the dust on the ground due to the dryness. Although there wasn't much dust, it still made people squint their eyes slightly. Nangong's body was covered with a white cloak that reached his knees. There was also a hood on the cloak, hiding Nangong's whole body in the cloak. Nangong's disaster sword was on his back, revealing only the dark hilt. At this moment, Nangong was on his way to meet with the members of the Akatsuki. He thought that he would go to the Rain Country to meet with the Akatsuki, but he didn't expect that the Akatsuki's designated meeting place would be the Earth Country. Sure enough, compared to the Fire Country, the Earth Country's climate is a bit harsh. Nangong complained slightly. In fact, the Earth Country is probably better than the Cloud Country, which is located in the highlands and hills, the Wind Country, which is located in the depths of the desert, and the Water Country, which is surrounded by water. However, compared to the Fire Country, which is the most abundant and comfortable of the 5 countries, there is still a fundamental gap. In the final analysis, the other 4 countries coveted the rich resources and fertile land of the Fire Country, causing wars over and over again. The information given by the Akatsuki was also very simple. They just said that they were going to catch a person and meet him in the Earth Country. Who they were going to catch and what kind of battle plan they had, they didn't disclose any information to the Bloodcloth Pavilion. This shows how careful and cautious the Akatsuki was. Nangong has been away from the Bloodcloth Pavilion headquarters for nearly a week, and Nangong himself was already in the hinterland of the Earth Country. Therefore, Nangong wore clothes that could completely hide him. Nangong's appearance can be said to be preserved in several ninja villages hostile to the Woodleaf village. Although Nangong wasn't afraid of facing the Iwagakure people, after all, he was carrying out a mission on behalf of the Bloodcloth Pavilion, so it was best to avoid trouble. Pulling the hood on his head, Nangong saw the outline of a town in the distance. It seems like it's here? Yes, this town was the place where Nangong and the Akatsuki's ninja met. I don't know who will come to carry out the mission with me. It can't be Itachi, right? Nangong was also very curious, in the end who in the Akatsuki organization would carry out the mission with him. If it was Itachi, then that would be the best because some things had to be discussed face to face. The town wasn't far from where Nangong was. Soon, Nangong arrived at the entrance of the town. After all, this was a time of peace, and there was no huge threat of war between the major ninja villages. It was just an ordinary town, so there was no unusually strict inspection. Nangong used a little trick to enter the town. Walking in front of a very ordinary-looking house, Nangong stopped. His eyes narrowed slightly, looking at this very ordinary-looking house very seriously. 1, 2, 7, 4. It's really a tight guard. The Akatsuki has a big plan. In the hinterland of the Earth Country, they can still bring so many ninjas and set up so many hidden sentries. Who do they want to catch? Is it possible that they want to catch the granddaughter of that old man Inoki? Yes, Nangong was observing the layout of the hidden sentries here. Just a rough observation, Nangong has already found 14 hidden sentries. Among them, the lowest ninja was an elite chunin. If such people were thrown out to set up hidden sentries, then how strong would the real combat unit be? Moreover, this is the hinterland of the Earth Country. With such a large number of ninjas, it's not so simple to hide from the eyes of the Umbu of Iwagakure. Although Nangong was very surprised, he was not intimidated to the point of not daring to act. Nangong directly put his hand on the door of the house, and with a force, the door was directly opened by Nangong. At the same time, several shadows flashed from the shadows. These ninjas arranged by the Akatsuki to guard the house didn't have the intention to talk to Nangongja. They directly took out their kunai and rushed towards Nangongja. Is this how the Akatsuki treats their guests? Nangongja snorted softly, and his momentum was released without any concealment. Although the ninjas guarding the house were strong, but compared to Nangongja, they were a lot worse. They were directly intimidated by Nangongja's momentum, and even their knees began to tremble slightly. The door of a house in the house was opened, and a female ninja with long purple hair came out. Step back. Although the female ninja's voice wasn't soft, the slightly magnetic voice made people feel that she must be a mature ninja with an extremely firm mind who is used to seeing storms and waves. Several ninjas of the Akatsuki knew that they were not Nangongja's opponent, and their boss ordered them to step back. Naturally, they quickly left Nangongja's range of pressure and turned into several shadows and returned to their original hiding place. I am Conan of the Akatsuki organization. I don't know which one of the 5 altar lords of the Blood Cloak Pavilion is your distinguished self? Conan looked at Nangongja and asked very calmly. Nangongja was not the enemy of her organization. When Nangongja confronted several ninjas of the Akatsuki organization, Conan already knew. Most of the ninjas of Nangongja's level were not so good-tempered, but Nangongja was obviously facing a sword, but he still didn't kill them. Instead, he spread his momentum to control several ninjas of the Akatsuki organization. This was like an invitation, making it clear that he wanted the real person in charge to come out and meet with her. A person who didn't have chakras fluctuation and didn't have any hostility to the Akatsuki organization, using a very simple elimination method, she knew that this person should be the person sent by the Blood Cloak Pavilion to assist her in carrying out the mission. And this kind of strength could only be possessed by the Altar Lord of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. Listening to Conan's words, Nangongja also restrained his momentum. I am indeed from the Blood Cloak Pavilion, but I am not the Altar Lord of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. Nangongja gently took off the hood on his head, revealing his face. I am the new leader of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, Nangongja. Chapter 193. When Nangongja said his name, the originally calm Conan's face changed color. Nangongja? Nangongja from Konoha, who is known as Yama? Conan looked at Nangongja with a slightly hostile gaze. It seemed that Conan was not so friendly to Woodleaf, and even had a bit of resentment. Woodleaf? That's already in the past. When Danzo made a move on my family, I no longer thought of myself as a Woodleaf ninja. Woodleaf and I have a mutually beneficial relationship. Since they are not benevolent, then I can only be unrighteous with them. Nangongja shook his head, and a strange color appeared in his eyes. Conan saw it very clearly. It was a look of resentment, a look of grief and indignation. It was the same look she saw in the mirror every day. I have no interest in all the dirty things between you and Woodleaf. Since you are here on behalf of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, then just carry out the mission with us. As the Nangongja, I recognize your strength very much. Conan said such a sentence indifferently, then turned around and left, returning to the small room where she was just now. She's not cute at all. Nangongja mumbled. The sound of air being torn apart instantly sounded, and a snow-white shuriken shot towards Nangongja. Although the speed of the shuriken was very fast, it was still very ordinary for Nangongja. Nangongja stretched out his hand, and the sharp white shuriken was already in his hand. The texture of the white shuriken was very strange. It was simply folded from white paper. Be careful when you talk next time. It's very impolite to talk behind people's back. Conan's voice came so leisurely. Although it was still dull, there was a feeling of anger unique to a young girl. Paper release? Nangongja's fingers slightly rubbed the white paper shuriken in his hand, thinking of the scattered information he collected about Conan and Nagato. This ninjutsu seemed to be practiced under the guidance of Jiraiya. Using white paper to perform ninjutsu was originally just a small trick, and it had not yet become a release technique. But with Conan's talent, this ninjutsu using white paper became more and more mature, and now it can be called a release technique similar to a secret technique. If even Conan can do this, then how powerful is Nagato, who is rumored to be more talented than Conan at this moment? Nangongja didn't know, because the information he knew was very scattered. Just a little bit of information about Conan and Nagato was the result of Nangongja's hard work. The legendary Child of Prophecy. I wonder which disciple of Jiraiya is he? Conan? Nagato? Or the fourth Hokage who has been wandering in the ninja world with almost no news about him, Watergate? Forget it, forget it. These things are too far away for me to care about. Nangongja had never believed in fate, gods, or Buddhas. Even the sage of the six paths, known as the ancestor of all ninjas, was not born holy. As long as I have enough strength, as long as my faith is firm. Whether it's fate or gods, Nangongja will not hesitate to cut them. Just when Nangongja was still rubbing the paper shuriken in his hand, an Akatsuki ninja came to Nangongja's side. Please follow me to your residence and rest for a while. Knowing that Nangongja was an external aide invited by their organization, the Akatsuki ninja became more respectful. This is the shinobi world. No matter how much you complain about a person in your heart, you can't ignore it. His strength is above you, you have to give him the respect he deserves. Well, lead the way, Nangongja said to the ninja standing next to him. Bloodcloth Pavilion actually chose a leader? This is really bad news. Originally, Bloodcloth Pavilion was managed by 5 altar lords, which in itself will bring a huge loophole to itself. Nagato and Uchiha Madara originally planned to use some means to pull the power of Bloodcloth Pavilion into the Akatsuki. Who would have thought that this Nangongja would pluck the peach instead? It seems that these things need to be discussed at length. Conan's mouth whispered slightly. Although Bloodcloth Pavilion was a hidden force, Conan was still very clear about their situation. Such an organization was only a little weaker than the Akatsuki on the surface. Nagato and Uchiha Madara have been envious of it for a long time. Bloodcloth Pavilion's loose management system also provided an opportunity for the Akatsuki to annex Bloodcloth Pavilion. Originally, the one who was sent to carry out the mission with the Akatsuki was supposed to be an altar lord of Bloodcloth Pavilion. With all kinds of arrangements, Conan was confident that she could pull that person into the Akatsuki. But Nangongja came, with the identity of Bloodcloth Pavilion's leader. All of this really disrupted the Akatsuki's plan. Conan stretched out her hand and waved it on a piece of paper in front of her. The white paper immediately moved on its own, but in the blink of an eye, the letter had already turned into a 1,000-paper crane. She held the paper crane in her left hand and made a hand seal with her right hand, and chakra instantly poured into the paper crane. The paper crane wobbled and waved its white paper wings, and it seemed to adapt to the flight for a while, and then it was slightly pushed out of the window by Conan. Fortunately, my main mission this time is not to take Bloodcloth Pavilion under my command, but to take another person. I will pass the message to Nagato first, and the rest will be handed over to Nagato and Uchiha Madara. A week of long journey indeed made Nangongja's state slightly worse. After a little rest in this house, Nangongja felt that he had almost recovered, but his door was knocked by the Akatsuki's ninja. Nangongja-sama? Conan, Sama said that everything is ready, and asked you to come and discuss it. Finally, is it time to get down to business? Nangongja was really bored in this house, and he already had the idea of starting the mission early, and then leaving as soon as possible. After all, this was the hinterland of the Earth Country, plus he had to assist the Akatsuki in carrying out the mission. In order to prevent his whereabouts from being leaked, Nangongja could only stay in the house every day. Okay, I'll go now. Chapter 194. Nangong-sama, I can only lead you here. Conan-sama and several other sama are already waiting inside. The Akatsuki ninja who led the way was just an ordinary member, so he couldn't enter the meeting room. He could only lead Nangongja to the entrance of the meeting room. It's okay, you can go. I'll trouble you to take care of me these past few days. I'll put in a few good words for you. The ninja who led the way had been taking care of Nangongja's life these past few days, and he took care of him seriously. Nangongja felt that it was necessary to give him some praise. "Thank you, Sama." Sure enough, he heard Nangongja's words. The ninja who led the way for Nangongja instantly beamed with joy and looked at Nangongja with eyes full of gratitude. Waving his hand, Nangongja indicated that the ninja can leave first. Straightening his lapel and brushing his somewhat messy hair, Nangongja opened the door of the meeting room. Before Nangongja could greet Conan, a person's voice suddenly sounded. "It's you?" Nangongja looked towards the direction of the voice and saw a ninja with silver hair who was wearing a black robe with red clouds on it, pointing his finger at Nangongja. In addition to shock, there was also a lot of anger. Why are you pointing at me? Who gave you the courage?" Nangongja was also a little angry. He didn't even speak, and this person directly jumped out and pointed at his nose. He was giving face to the people of Akatsuki, so they also became arrogant? "You actually don't remember me? Very good, very good. I clearly remember that you cut off my limbs and kicked my head like a ball. This time, I'll definitely let you know how terrifying Lord Evil God is." The silver-haired ninja's face became very ferocious, as if he had gone mad. Break his limbs? Kicking his head like a ball? Why did it sound so familiar? So it's you. Nangongja recalled the time when he brought little Linger and Mashiro to the country of hot water. It was a bloody battlefield, as well as the young man from the Cthulhuism Society. "I didn't expect that you would still be alive after being tortured to such an extent. Do you have the life of a cockroach?" Ignoring the fact that Xiaonan was still beside him, Nangongja directly used taunt on Fei Dan. "Ah, you bastard, Master Fei Duan is going to kill you. No, I want to break all your limbs and let you know the pain that Master Fei Duan suffered that day." Fei Duan was obviously infuriated by Nangongja's attitude. His originally abnormal nerves were now even more strung up. She didn't care that Xiaonan was still beside her. She took out a scythe with 3 sharp blades and held it in her hand. "I'll let you have a taste of the power of the Bloody March scythe." Just as Fei Dan leaped up and stood on the table in the conference room with the scythe in his hand raised high, Conan's slightly angry voice came over. "Fei Duan. Are you done? Did I ask you to come here so that you can disobey orders and attack the teammates who are about to carry out the mission with us?" Following her voice, countless pieces of white paper also circled around Xiaonan's body. Xiaonan stretched out her hand and pointed, and the white paper quickly flew towards Fei Duan as if it had found its target. The clear sound of the white paper breaking through the air was enough to prove the power of the white paper. Seeing that the white paper was about to touch Fei Duan's body, the sound of metal clashing rang out. Only Nangongja was standing in front of Fei Duan, and the disaster sword had been unsheathed. It was Nangongja who blocked these attacks for Fei Duan. "I don't know what Sir is doing. I'm clearly educating the person who offended you, but Sir actually blocked these attacks for him?" Xiaonan's face was a little cold. What was this? Someone from her organization came to help her, but in the end, he was the enemy of another person who came to help her. She was educating the people from her organization, but was stopped by an outsider? This kind of development indeed made Xiaonan feel a surge of anger rising in her heart. "Xiaonan, you don't have to be like this. Since Fei Duan wants to take revenge on me, let him come. Otherwise, I won't be at ease letting someone who has been watching my back carry out the mission with me. Since I can defeat him once, I can defeat him more times." With that, Nangongja looked at Fei Duan behind him with a mocking expression. "Don't you think so? Chunibyu. F*Sika your Chunibyu, I'm the emissary of the evil god." "The emissary?" Fei Duan raised the huge scythe in his hand and directly chopped down at Nangongja's head. "Don't be so anxious. This place is so small that it can't be used at all. Let's go to the courtyard and spar." Nangongja held the disaster sword and blocked the huge scythe that was coming at him. His expression was very relaxed, and it was obvious that he still had enough strength left. He turned the disaster sword in his hand slightly, and the bloody march scythe that Fei Duan used all his strength to chop down heavily on the table. In an instant, the huge table had been split into 2. Nangongja exerted strength in his legs and ran out of the meeting room. He arrived at the slightly spacious courtyard. At this moment, Fei Duan was overwhelmed by his anger. He didn't think much and directly followed Nan Gongzhi to the courtyard. Those two bastards were supposed to act in secret, but now they are fighting. Once the movement is too big, it will attract the rock ninjas. What if the target is alarmed? Looking at the excited Fei Duan and the calm Nan Gongzhi at this moment, Conan was very angry. Are these two people so ignorant of the overall situation? He stomped hard on the ground beneath his feet, just like how Nan Gongzhi and Fei Duan were being stomped on by him. But Conan quickly calmed down and ordered the Akatsuki ninjas who were standing in the courtyard looking at Fei Duan and Nan Gongzhi with a stunned expression. What are you doing? Everyone go to the courtyard wall and start arranging the barrier. Cover up everything in the courtyard. I will look at the two of them. If they make too much trouble, I will stop them in time. This operation has been planned for so long. There must be no mistakes. Conan calmly gave orders to the Akatsuki ninjas. She was like a queen with unparalleled power. Chapter 195. Although Xiao Nan's queenly temperament was very attractive, neither Nan Gongzhi nor Fei Duan had the time to appreciate it. The first time the two of them fought was several years ago. At that time, Fei Duan had just completed the sacrificial ritual for the Cthulhu. He had not yet familiarized himself with the Cthulhu's undying ability, so that battle was almost meaningless to the two of them now. Whether it was Nan Gongzhi or Fei Duan, both of them had grown over the years. The two of them needed to be extra careful in this battle. The bloody March scythe in Fei Duan's hand was slightly glowing with a bloody brilliance under the sunlight. It was obvious that it had drunk the blood of many enemies. Nan Gongzhi's majestic inner strength and sword energy were also constantly emitted. The originally slightly undulating ground began to flatten under the impact of Nan Gongzhi's inner strength and sword energy. The battle was about to start. The confrontation between the two of them was an action that tested the temperament of both sides. Compared to Nan Gongzhi, Fei Duan was obviously more inclined to launch the first round of attack himself. Fei Duan roared, and the chakra on his body began to flow to his feet and hands, increasing his physical fitness. Even the ground had a small pit because of Fei Duan's power. The bloody March scythe was a heavy weapon, especially when Fei Duan used the chakra to stimulate his body and unleash an extremely tyrannical power. The bloody March scythe almost left an afterimage in the air, and the ear-piercing sound of it breaking through the air was so clear. Nan Gongzhi knew that if he wanted to defeat Fei Duan, the most important thing was that he absolutely could not let Fei Duan collect his blood. This was the most important rule when dealing with the followers of the Cthulhuism society. Although he was not the first to attack, Nan Gongzhi relied on his speed and skills to make his sword speed reach an extremely high level. The sword was like a venomous snake that had been lying dormant for a long time, revealing its venomous fangs, piercing towards Fei Duan from an extremely tricky angle. The two of them were very fast, and in an instant, they were already standing opposite each other. At this time, Fei Duan's face revealed a slightly cruel smile. The bloody March scythe's long handle had unknowingly turned into a chain. Originally, Fei Duan was holding the bloody March scythe with both hands and slashing towards Nan Gongzhi, but now he had already grabbed the end of the chain. The bloody March scythe's speed became even faster under the effect of inertia, and swept towards Nan Gongzhi's neck. Oh, you've really learned? But what's the point of such a small trick? Bloody March scythe, bloody March scythes, bloody March scythe, bloody March scythe, scythe, bloody March. But he was still very calm. His rights, he held the scythe, bloody March. Nan Gongzhi held the heavenly calamity sword's simple and unadorned scabbard in his left hand. This was the bloody scythe, the scythe march, the march, bloody march, with the was held, blood-eating. A crisp sound rang out as Nan Gongzhi blocked the three-moon sickle with his ordinary-looking black scabbard. That's right, the scabbard and the hilt of the heavenly tribulation sword were made of the same material. It was extremely hard. Fei Duan knew that the three-moon sickle wouldn't be of any use this time, so he shook his wrist, wanting to take the three-moon sickle into his hand. It's useless. Nangongzhi exerted force with his left hand and used a skillful technique to entangle the three-moon scythe with his scabbard. The three-moon sickle seemed to be glued to the three-moon sickle, and there was no way to retrieve it. Although you have an immortal body, if I were to blind one of your eyes, your battle prowess would definitely decrease a lot, right? That's right. Originally, Nangongzhi's sword looked like it was going to stab Fei Duan's abdomen, but Nangongzhi's wrist turned and stabbed Fei Duan's eyes. Go ahead and try. Do you think I, Master Fei Duan, am so easy to deal with? Obviously, his weapon had been restrained by Nangongzhi. One of his hands couldn't do anything because he was unwilling to give up his weapon, but Fei Duan didn't seem to be worried that he would be blinded by Nangongzhi at all. Instead, he laughed and ridiculed Nangongzhi. A trick? Nangongzhi knew that Fei Duan must have some tricks up his sleeve. Sure enough, Fei Duan's other hand suddenly took out an iron rod with a sharp spike at the end. It stabbed toward Nangongzhi's body. The iron rod was only about 20 centimeters long. It was just like a strangely shaped dagger. Nangongzhi decided to give up this attack and directly used the Heavenly Tribulation Sword to push away the iron rod. Just as he was about to pull away and make a second attack, the black iron rod suddenly elongated. Retreat! 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 He absolutely couldn't let his blood fall into Fei Duan's hands. Nangongzhi used his internal force to stimulate his legs, and his speed soared again and again. However, the iron rod elongated faster and faster. The iron rod was getting closer and closer to Nangongzhi's abdomen. 3 centimeters, 2 centimeters, 1 centimeter, seeing that Nangongzhi was about to be stabbed by the iron rod. Haha, you bastard, just die under the power of Master Fei Duan and Master Cthulhu. Fei Duan was very excited. He felt that he had won this round. Nangongzhi's panicked movement to avoid the iron rod suddenly stopped. Because of the rapid retreat, his slightly bent body and lowered head were now standing straight. You think you won? Fei Duan looked carefully. Although his iron rod was very close to Nangongzhi's abdomen, it still didn't touch Nangongzhi's body. Just a little bit. A little bit. Originally, I thought that after these few years, you should have made some progress. But other than learning these strange moves, it seems that you haven't improved much. Boring, boring. Nangongzhi's face didn't have the nervous expression at the beginning of the battle. Instead, it was very relaxed. As if he didn't put Fei Duan in his eyes, he spoke to Nangongzhi like an elder educating a child. Ah, back then, you had this expression on your face when you humiliated me to such an extent. I once swore that I must let you have a taste of humiliation. But now, you are still looking at me with this expression. What do you have? What do you have? Master Fei Duan, even if I get seriously injured, I will let you know how powerful I am. I will let you experience the power of Lord Evil God. Chapter 196. Fei Duan's angry words did not frighten Nangongzhi. Instead, it was as if he had told a particularly funny joke, making Nangongzhi laugh. The more Nangongzhi laughed, the fiercer Fei Duan's anger became. What you said is quite nice, but you want to defeat me with this. You want to humiliate me? You're still far from it. You'd better train for another 10 years. This time, Fei Duan was no longer the first to attack. Because Nangongzhi was the first to attack. The Heaven's Calamity Sword was covered with a layer of blue brilliance, and countless fine sword chi surrounded the Heaven's Calamity Sword. The sword chi cut through the air, and even the Heaven's Calamity Sword began to become a little blurry. Originally, you weren't worth me using this move, but after all, I just learned it, and I still need someone to practice the sword. You, who can't die, came at the right time. I'll let you try the power of this Ghost God Sword. That's right, Nangongzhi was using the Ghost God Sword, Fatal 14th Sword, which he had used when his heart demon had crushed him. Although Nangongzhi had a more powerful and suitable Ghost God Sword, it was too much of a burden on Nangongzhi's body, so Nangongzhi was not willing to use it easily. As for the Fatal 14th Sword, most of the pressure was concentrated on the sword, and the pressure on the human body was relatively small. Using Fei Duan to test the sword was a spontaneous idea. His left hand turned into a sword finger and gently stroked the spine of the Heaven's Calamity sword. Countless murderous aura and hostility were emitted from Nangongji's body. Even behind Nangongji, a ferocious shadow of Yama appeared. Nangongji's eyes were gradually covered with blood, especially the pupils, which had turned into a rich blood color. When Nangongji's body rose and fell slightly because of his breathing, the red in his eyes seemed to spread out, leaving a red light mark in the air. Conan stood on the edge of the battle between Haydn and Nangongji. At the beginning, when Nangongji and Haydn fought head-on, their level was actually not that high. He was simply relying on his own physical fitness to wield the weapon in his hand like a barbarian. Conan even thought that the rumors about Nangongji in the ninja world were false. Legend has it that Nangongji's teachings, and even better than white. Such a battle was really disappointing. However, when Nangongji's heavenly calamity sword was covered with internal energy and sword energy, Xiaonan finally understood. The only one who had truly used his full strength was actually Flying Duan. Nangongji just played with Haydn and wanted to test Haydn's strength. Whether it was Nangongji's murderous aura and hostility, or Nangongji's state at the moment, Conan was shocked. Even Nagato, who had the Rinnegan, and the masked man who called himself Uchiha, they didn't have the same state as Nangongji when fighting. If she had to use a word to describe it, perhaps only born to fight was appropriate. Putting everything aside, whether it was his own body or all his emotional fluctuations have been removed from Nangongji's body. At this time, Nangongji just wanted to stab with his sword. Haydn was trapped by Nangongji's murderous aura and hostility. It was as if the surroundings were filled with cement and he couldn't move at all. There are many genjutsu that can do this, such as some of the secret genjutsu of Konoha Village's Yugi family. If it was in genjutsu, then there were naturally many ways to solve it. But Nangongji at this moment was purely relying on his murderous aura and hostility to deter the opponent. Unless the opponent's murderous aura and hostility surpassed Nangongji's, or there was a crushing gap in strength, there was no way to get rid of Nangongji's comfort. Obviously, Haydn didn't meet any of the conditions mentioned above. Conan wanted to go up and stop the battle between the two people. The real mission hasn't started yet, but they were already in a mess. Not only would it have no good impact on the later mission, but more importantly, it would weaken the strength of their side. Their target wasn't someone who was easy to deal with either. It wasn't a good sign to let their strength weaken at this time. But when Conan walked to the edge of the space formed by Nangongji's murderous aura and hostility, Conan found that even she had no way to invade and stop Nangongji and Haydn. This matter was troublesome. Fortunately, Haydn was immortal. So be it, let Haydn have a good taste of his lesson. It could also be considered as Haydn restraining his bad temper, right? Conan couldn't take any action, and Haydn couldn't even move. He could only watch as Nangongji's sword got closer and closer to him. Haydn could already feel the chill on the sword's edge. His body, which had become slightly sluggish because of his immortal body, was now extremely sensitive to the dangerous aura on the sword's edge. His hair stood on end just like that. Haydn's eyes could still move, and Haydn's thoughts could still move. Nangongji's sword would directly pierce through his throat, Haydn guessed. Haydn could almost imagine his throat being pierced, and his blood constantly gushing out from his throat. That feeling of suffocation, that feeling of his body losing its warmth. A kind of fear burned in Haydn's heart like a fire. He didn't feel the usual pleasure of facing death with the enemy when he was injured. There was only the fear of being injured and the helplessness of not being able to control his life in his own hands. It was really a very annoying feeling. Haydn could only close his eyes as if he had accepted his fate. Anyway, he couldn't escape Nangongji's attack. At most, it would be like a few years ago where Nangongji cut off his limbs. So what if it hurt a little, 1 second, 2 seconds? A long time had passed, but Haydn still didn't feel the sword cutting through his body. Strange? What was this bastard Nangongji doing? Fei Duan could only slowly open his eyes, wanting to see what his enemy was doing. Nangong's smiling face was reflected in Haiden's eyes. The Heaven's Disaster Sword's edge was only a little away from Haiden's neck, just hanging there. Was this bastard Nangongja humiliating him? This was the only thought left in Haiden's mind. Chapter 197. Nangongja turned his wrist, shook the Heaven's Disaster Sword in his hand, and put the Heaven's Disaster Sword back into the scabbard. Are you humiliating me? Are you pitying me? Haiden's sensitive nerves were once again stimulated by Nangongja. It seemed that he wanted to use the bloody March sickle to fight with Nangongja again. Nangongja glanced at Haiden coldly, then turned his head and no longer looked at Haiden. You bastard, you dare to look down on this uncle? Haiden roared and was about to attack, but Conan's slightly cold voice had already reached Haiden's ears. Haven't you made enough trouble? Haiden. Hearing Conan's voice, Haiden's body trembled. Haiden was the kind of person who didn't submit to anyone. When Nangongja cut off his hands and feet and chopped his head, he was brought to the Akatsuki. Haiden was naturally restless, and he often provoked other Akatsuki members. As the person who helped Nagato manage the Akatsuki, Conan naturally couldn't ignore Haiden's behavior. She directly tied Haiden's hands and feet, hung him in a square where people often gathered in the Akatsuki, and used her paper release to cut off Haiden's flesh little by little. Haiden was indeed immortal, but he still felt pain. When Haiden was about to faint, Conan would inject a highly concentrated nutrient solution for Haiden, so that Haiden could recover quickly with the nutrient solution, and then continue to cut the flesh on Haiden's body with the sharp blade made of white paper. This lesson lasted for an entire 3 days. From then on, Haiden may talk nonsense to other people, but he still instinctively trembled in front of Conan. Whether it was the provocation to Nangongja or the battle with Nangongja, it was actually discussed with Conan before. Although it may be a bit noisy, it was still carried out with Conan's acquiescence. Now, Xiaonan's reprimand made Fei Duan calm down. Fei Dan glared fiercely at Nangongja and put away the weapon in his hand. He stood silently behind Xiaonan, not saying a word. Nangongja saw everything clearly. The twists and turns of the story were very clear in his mind. However, there were some things that were best understood in one's heart. Saying it out loud would only make everyone feel awkward. There was no point in it at all. Can we talk about the proper business now? After all, some troublesome matters have been settled. Nangongja glanced at Fei Duan, who was standing behind Xiaonan. However, Fei Duan didn't seem to hear Nangongja's words as he stood there silently. Of course, we've already determined the target's location. The battle plan has basically been formulated, but after seeing your strength today, I think we can slightly improve the battle plan. Xiaonan looked at Nangongja and nodded. At the same time, there seemed to be an imperceptible smile on her face. It doesn't matter. You can decide. I'm the foreign aide you invited. You came up with a battle plan. As long as I can execute it, I will naturally cooperate with you. Nangongja was really not interested in changing the battle plan. Here is the target's information. Xiaonan waved her hand, and an Akatsuki ninja took a folder in front of Nangongja. Reaching out and taking the folder in his hand, Nangongja flipped through the document casually. The disciple of Tsuchikage? It's really a big deal. You dare to make a move on Inoki's disciple? Nangongja didn't take long to know who the enemy he was about to face was. It was the disciple of the current Tsuchikage. Some of Daidara's deeds were quite detailed in the information. He was simply an explosive maniac. Many crazy attack missions were carried out by this Daidara. He was arrogant and crazy. Nangongja even wondered whether Inoki wanted to cultivate a disciple or a killing machine. Although Daidara now had the title of rebellious ninja, Nangongja didn't think that Inoki had given up on Daidara. Now that Akatsuki wants to reach out to Tsuchikage, it means that many secrets about Iwagakure will be revealed in front of Akatsuki. This matter is not easy to deal with. No wonder Daidara's strength was average, but Akatsuki still spent a lot of money to invite people from Bloodcloak Pavilion to carry out the mission together. You are taking advantage of Inoki's tiger whiskers. Although this old man is indeed old, but if he really explodes, not many people can stop him. Nangongja shook his head slightly and threw the information about Deidara in his hand on the table. Deidara was originally a rebellious ninja of Iwagakure. Naturally, he won't get close to Iwagakure. As long as we find the right opportunity, we can catch Deidara before Iwagakure can react. No matter how powerful Inoki is, as long as he follows to Akatsuki, we will naturally have a way to deal with him. Conan said confidently. Nangongja didn't know, but Conan knew that Iwagakure and Akatsuki actually had various transactions. Both sides were well aware of each other's strength. Akatsuki showed Inoki's strength. Although it wasn't enough to compete with Iwagakure, it was enough to bring a lot of trouble to Iwagakure. There is only 1,000 days of being a thief, how can there be 1,000 days of guarding against thieves? Once what's done is done, with Inoki's shrewd character, he can naturally make the right choice. Forget it, anyway, it's your Akatsuki. As long as you can bear all the consequences, I don't need to worry about you. When it's time to act, just call me. Nangongja turned around and was about to leave, but he was stopped by Conan. Sir Nangong, please wait a moment. Please take this. Conan handed over a black robe that was very similar to the one worn by Haydn and Conan. This is the uniform of our senior members. Since you are now employed by us, why don't you wear it when performing tasks? It can help you hide your appearance. It's always good to have less trouble. He didn't know if Conan had investigated Nangongja, but she knew that Nangongja was afraid of trouble. Nangongja didn't know how to refute this. He could only take the black robe from Conan's hand, nodded, and left. Chapter 198. Time always moved forward on its own, not allowing anyone to explain. The sun set in the west, and the moon rose in the east. The stars in the sky embellished the black curtain, emitting their own brilliance. Nangongja sat on the roof of the house that seemed to be a little narrow. The green jade gourd was beside him, and a jade cup was beside him. The clear wine was sitting quietly in the cup. Nangongja reached out and took the cup. With a flip of his wrist, all the wine entered Nangongja's mouth. The rich but elegant wine fragrance lingered in Nangongja's mouth. Nangongja squinted his eyes slightly, seemingly savoring the wonderful taste of the drunken immortal wine. I didn't expect that the legendary Yama, who killed people like Scything Flax, was also a glutton for wine. A cold voice broke the silence of the night. A girl with long purple hair, dressed in a loose black robe with red clouds on it, stood behind Nangongja without anyone noticing. Xiao Nan had a playful expression on her face, as if she had caught Nangongja's pigtail. Glutton for wine? Not really. One of my seniors really likes to drink wine. I don't know when I was led astray by him. Although the wine in the cup is sometimes a hindrance, I feel that without it, there is not much taste left. Nangongja smiled embarrassedly, as if he did not take Xiao Nan's words to heart. He was just reminiscing about the past. Xiao Nan did not continue on this topic. Instead, she silently walked to Nangongja's side. She picked up the green jade gourd, and her nose twitched a few times as she poured the wine into the gourd. This is a good wine. As she spoke, she opened her right hand, and a few pieces of white paper danced on top of it. After a while, a wine cup made of paper was held in Xiao Nan's hand. He glanced at Nangongja, as if asking if he could have a taste of the wine. Nangongja also smiled. Just a moment ago, he was still saying that he was a glutton for alcohol. But now, he picked up his wine and wanted to ask if he could have a sip? Nan was an interesting person. This wine is the Drunken Immortal Brew. It was given to me by my senior. There was no one in this world who knew how to brew it, so it was better to drink it a little. Since little Nan wants to give it a try, it's naturally possible. After Nangongja introduced the name of the wine, he agreed to Xiao Nan's request. Xiao Nan seemed to have taken advantage of something. She took the green jade gourd and poured a cup of wine into the paper cup in her hand. Holding the glass of wine, Xiao Nan sat down beside Nangongja. In front of them was the open space where Nangongja and Fei Duan fought during the day. Although the Akatsuki's ninjas also cleaned up, the traces of the battle were still so obvious. Fighting and war always destroy all the beauty in the world. For no reason, Xiaonan actually sighed with emotion. After all, Nangongja collected some information about the 3 disciples of Jiraiya in the Rain Country. They were all orphans in the war. Their hatred for war and fighting must be deep in their bones. So, you are working hard to quell the war? Nangongja didn't directly say who the so-called you were, but Xiaonan knew very well that he was talking about Yahiko, Nagato, and herself. We just happened to find a feasible way to quell the war, and we are working hard for it. Xiaonan didn't know why, but in front of Nangongja, she didn't suppress all the things in her heart like usual. Instead, she directly said what she wanted to say. Xiaonan wasn't a particularly opinionated person. When Xiaonan, Yahiko, and Nagato were orphans in the Rain Country, they were struggling to survive. At that time, Xiaonan just wanted to survive. Later, she met Jiraiya and became his disciple. She founded the Akatsuki and became an important member. In fact, a lot of it was because of Yahiko and Nagato, who struggled to survive together with her since childhood. When Yahiko was killed by Danzo and Hanzo, Xiaonan didn't know what she was pursuing. The resentment and helplessness in her heart made Xiaonan want to help Nagato realize Yahiko's last wish. Since then, she has been working hard for this ridiculous, big plan. She became the messenger of God under Nagato. Isn't that a great thing? There is no one in this world who doesn't want to live in a peaceful world. It's very commendable that you can muster the courage to take this step. Perhaps it's because of the few glasses of wine? Nangongja's words gradually became more and more. Speaking of which, my experience is similar to yours. My parents and the place where I lived were also destroyed by a group of people. Since then, I have been wandering in the ninja world, relying on my sister. But maybe it's because of my good fortune. I have some strength, so I joined the Woodleaf to seek protection. Nangongja seemed to be thinking about his life, and he talked about the most difficult days of his life so far. Listening to Nangongja's words, Xiaonan also seemed to remember the days when she, Yahiko, and Nagato relied on each other. After joining the Woodleaf, I killed a lot of people, but every time I told myself that every person I killed was for my sister, for the people I cared about. Because only in this way can I let them live a better and safer life under the protection of the Woodleaf. You didn't do anything wrong. Xiaonan seemed to see Nangongja's inner struggle. As a person who doesn't like to take other people's lives, Nangongja's thoughts at this moment, Xiaonan felt that she could empathize with him. I used to think that I didn't do anything wrong, but Danzo made a move on my family. Nangongja shook his head. When he said Danzo's name, he still tightly held the glass in his hand and poured the wine directly into his mouth. He didn't have the same expression as before, he just looked like he was venting. Danzo. Xiaonan also murmured Danzo's name in her mouth. The scene of Yahiko's death replayed in Xiaonan's mind over and over again. After drinking the wine in the glass, she gently threw the paper cup in her hand away. Xiaonan got up and walked away, leaving only one sentence echoing in the air. Tomorrow's action. That you're tuning in to the Wandering Hero YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.